Similar, equities up 6.96, fixed income up 3.28, real estate up down 6.64%. So our state of plus,
Mary and Sheila, can you hear us?
hear us now?
Hi, I can hear you now. It's Sheila.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Mary's still there.
It's on mute.
Mary, on mute. I think she said, I can hear you. We can't hear her, but I think I can hear your lips.
Okay, thank you. So no, not at all. I'm just kind of figure out the performance now. So the thoughts, kind of where we're at right now. I think the inclination of the JRID is to maintain the allocations as they are. You know, we talk about that at every meeting. We bring it up every meeting because we've got Vanguard with us. We rely on their research and their help. And we feel quite comfortable with the allocations. We've had a lot of discussions about private equity. You see a lot of slides dedicated in this handout before you to private equity, modeling what the runoff will be from our vintage allocations, whether or not we want to allocate new funds, whether this is the time to do it, what that means long-term for the portfolio. And we're nowhere near done with the discussion and the analysis. If we were to make another allocation to private equity, that would be probably in the third quarter of this year. So plenty of time to still discuss and debate. We might, this is me speaking, we might end up being proving very lucky in that there was a period of time we didn't invest in private equity. So we're at the end of the J curve of the vintage private equity positions, and we've yet to really lay into investing new dollars. And so this might prove to be a very good time to be putting new money to work. But you know, we're going to take it step by step with Vanguard along with us doing the analysis. Discount rate. We're always going to talk about the discount rate here. Our discount rate has been at 6.9%. We didn't move it in 2022. We've received kind of running guidance or modeling, if you will, from both Vanguard and Milliman that would suggest we're perfectly well situated, very reasonably positioned. Nobody seems to be arguing to change the discount rate either down or up. Looks like we're very much in our zone performance-wise. And then the other big deal going on with the JRIB is the movement of the administration over to Milliman. I think it's in the final, we're in the final stages. We expect kind of an update from them, and you know, if they turn the keys over to them. Whether it could be late next month, could be early July, but they seem to be on time, and it seems to be proceeding well. So kind of happy with where we sit, steady as she goes, and it's nice to see the equities performing. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. One thing that stood out to me for some of the key takeaways. Third bullet down says market is stop on stably pared back expectations, but further interest rate rises. 2 to 3 rates that's now priced in better.
And I think that would have changed since you know, we don't know. We don't know.
This?
No, I didn't write this.
Okay.
It's Vanguard. Remember, Vanguard wrote this. This is Vanguard.
Okay, so this is all their presentation.
This is all their.
Since they wrote it.
Since they wrote it. I mean,
Only because the town, in regards to, we just wrote the process. And one of the major drivers of the upcoming budget is interest income.
yeah.
From all the funds to have, which I don't know off my head, somewhere around 5%, looking at getting 4.5 to 5%. This thing goes down, the Fed cuts 2 or 3 times in the next year, like is said right here.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
We're gonna have a significant hole in our budget. Like significant.
Okay. I'm not an interest rate forecast. And I would never, you know, I don't want to step into Jerome.
Yeah, I'm not saying you are, I'm saying Vanguard.
Vanguard.
I think they're a pretty good organization.
Yeah. You know, that doesn't mean that, you know, I don't know how to kind of respond to that. You know, we can certainly ask them again, right? I mean, we'll meet again if you want to track that more closely.
That,
I mean-
yeah, I think information or
How they're thinking about rates.
about what their thoughts are.
Yeah,
So we could, July 1st, start thinking about where we are, where the whole.
right. But I hear you, right? I mean, let's assume you put everything in a 1-year CD, right?
Yep.
When it comes due and you've got to then reinvest the funds, and maybe they're not at a similar rate. Maybe they're at a lower rate. Maybe they're at a higher rate.
Mhm.
So, I don't, you know,
And on the fixed income investments that we have, are they tied to interest rates now?
well, every fixed income investment, of course, is. Every, I mean, it's, every fixed income.
So,
has
so
a-
I had expected maybe in the last quarter that they would see more. And we did, I was a little disappointed by that, considering how much we're seeing on the town side. I mean, even our variances tonight.
Yeah,
So significant increases and a significant surplus that's gonna be caused by the increased interest rate. So I guess I'm just not understanding.
So-
I can't say I'm not, anything but a fixed income spending, that's what I'm asking.
so let's look at what we look at. We look at a performance return. We're not looking at the embedded coupon, right? I'm not looking at an embedded
Yeah.
yield.
Yeah.
What instead I'm looking at is a price to market. So to the extent that that fixed income fund represents broadly, you know, the fixed income market, which is what we've invested in. We're not investing in a particular issue. This is Vanguard's fixed income product, right? You can expect probably to see over a period of time, you know, that portfolio will reflect more current yields.
Yeah.
Whereas there might be legacy issues that are in there that would have seen price falling, right? Because yields go up, because of the inversion, right? If yields go up, prices go down.
And in talking to Vanguard,
Yeah,
what are they seeing going forward? I mean, this is just a result of what we've done, past quarter, past year, you know, whatever. So what are you hearing from them?
over what period of time? I mean, I don't hear anything from them over a period of year.
What do you hear?
We hear them 30 years forward,
Oh.
discounted back, 10 years. I mean, you know, if you think about the view of the pension funds is so long-term focused. We're really not making a 1-year decision. So we don't hear a lot on a 1-year basis. And I think Vanguard would probably come back and say they're not at all comfortable with a 1-year view.
But they don't think our allocations are
No,
what it is,
no,
in
no.
any regard, on any of the categories.
Really, and we push them, I mean, I push them, right? Every meeting, I've been let a question go by without asking, are we allocated correctly? Should we be more on the risk spectrum, less on the risk spectrum? Should we be rethinking, should we have sold our real estate, for instance, position a year and a half ago?
Yeah.
And they're very dutiful in doing their modeling and getting a sense, but everything is geared to a long-term perspective. And they absolutely continue to believe that we should be a little more on the risk spectrum, right? Out there on the risk of more equities, tilted more toward equities than fixed income. And we should maintain an allocation to private equity. And they feel that we should maintain an allocation to real estate. And that's about as clear, right?
When you say more tilted towards equities, are you saying that our allocation should go, or we should stay where we are tilted towards?
We're tilted.
Yeah, we've seen,
We are tilted.
yeah, so they're just basically saying, stay in that model.
Stay in that model. Yeah.
Like to ask.
Sure. Mhm.
Jared, are you hearing anything from our experts in regards to who came before us about the interest rates potentially going up like 2 or 3 more times in the next year now? Vanguard's prediction that they may be coming down 2 or 3 more times.
Are you talking from the town side?
Yeah, from the town side.
So, I mean, I think we'll talk about that more when Caitlin does her quarterly
Okay.
review, and we'll talk about, because that's gonna be a big piece of, a significant piece of the, side of her report.
Okay.
So, you know, we can talk about that more, but, I mean, in short, I would say it's basically as it's been projected.
Okay, so our experts are saying that basically Vanguard's prediction and their presentation is wrong.
But it's very.
That it's not gonna go down 2 or 3 times, it's gonna be going up 2 or 3 more times.
But it's very, you know, as Carolyn said, they're two very different things where we're looking, you know, the window of investments on the town side of the town cash is a lot narrower than what we do do with pension and OPEB. Also, the piggyback on Karen. The fixed income is only a piece of,
Yeah.
it's not insignificant, about 20%, but it's only a piece of the portfolio, so.
Yeah, I understand. I'm not talking about over long term. I'm talking about Vanguard's representation here on their presentation, because they're just talking about the next year and how that's going to, the key takeaways, what they're presenting. And they're not talking about like what's interest rates are going to be doing for 30 years. So it just concerned me when I read it, knowing that we had just, 6 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago?
So I
Approved the
think we
budget
had,
based on what we
to
did.
Carolyn's point, this is the report, was for the first quarter.
Yeah.
We've had at least one rate hike since then.
Yep.
Two, but at least one.
Definitely one, right?
Just wanna, and I don't know if this makes you feel better, Jim, but I just wanna remind everyone. So I have the effective interest rates that we budgeted for the general fund and the WPCA combined were 3.4%. So they were below the market rate that we were getting at the time. And one important piece is that a significant portion of our portfolio, our fixed income portfolio, was going to be invested in durations that matched when the money was going to be used. And a significant number of those were for a year. So I'm assuming those investments were already made at the rates where that, when we transferred the portfolio to Janny. So you have that little bit of protection there. So if you had an estimated 13-month duration, they were matching those durations. So it wasn't like they were in a, 1 month money market or something like that. So, I think the big change we made was to budget money for the money market and STIP account, which had no budget. So when you look at that combined, our average interest rate, our interest income in the general fund and WPCA combined, because we allocated a piece, was 3.44%. So that would tolerate, a few declines in the market. If that makes anybody, feel any better. So just did want to add that. Yeah. It wasn't, we didn't budget at 4.5%, 5%. We knew that we were making that in the STIP fund at the time, which was part of why we budgeted, I think, 3.5%.
Yeah, the only thing that's missing from the page with Vanguard is that they didn't give a sense for the magnitude of the cut, right? I mean, if they were 50 basis points on the way up, it might be a 25%, 25 basis point change, which would be pretty small.
1% of the way down.
Right. I mean, it's like if I were to like 150 basis points on you. And so I think the thinking is they'll taper off a little bit, but this is what the market is focused on. Short term.
Yeah, just to go back to the question that Mr. Wells asked about whether we're right, whether our allocation of risk and categories is appropriate or not. And I certainly took a lot of comfort from what you said based on your interaction and pressing of our professor. But it does beg a follow-up question though, and I wonder how much data they have about our portfolio of beneficiaries are they using and relying on? Because obviously I imagine that a fund with an average age of 35 versus an average age of 60 would have a different risk and equity mix, right? So I'm just, if you could just expand on how much you're working with that's Fairfield specific, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so it's not in this presentation, right, that they gave us, but it has been in previous presentations where, and it will be in the discount rate discussion, where they actually are pulling in the expectancy, the life expectancy, the experience rates, the mortality tables.
Yeah.
And overlaying those onto the portfolio to make the decision. I do not want to suggest to you that, they sit there and we look at that with a fine-tooth comb. But it is part of the allocation discussion. There hasn't been any change to the demographics or the expectancy of, it moves slowly. These pension funds move so very slowly. And with, 900 people or so in the plan on the town side, 500 police and fire is still open. There's still plenty running. So we haven't quite hit that point. Yeah, and Milliman, of course, when they do their actuarial analysis, they are pulling. Yeah, we've been happy with their modeling, and how Vanguard has kind of ingested our information.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I would agree with Mr. Curley. I'm glad that, I take comfort in some of what Vanguard has told us, and it sounds like you've been challenging them on some of these predictions and assumptions, but I gotta tell you, real estate, commercial real estate, to me, I see nothing but a world of pain ahead. And obviously, we were down somewhat here. I know this is a long-term portfolio, but I'm just wondering about the risk of a bunch of realized losses in our real estate investments here, given, what do these funds look like and what's the duration of these funds? Because,
Yeah, so, we have one investment in real estate. Okay, it's one fund. It's the principal, real estate fund. We had principal enhanced property. We had them in to present to us in the March, I think it was the March meeting, where they went through their portfolio. They're quite diverse. It's not like they're only in commercial real estate, New York City, for instance. Right. Right? And it would be a shame if they, and they're not just in commercial real estate Miami, which would be a good place to be right now. They're much more broadly diversified. They do have, like every other commercial real estate fund, there's a good amount that they have to renegotiate. There's a good amount of they have a good amount of debt that they have to deal with in the near term. We've asked them for updates on it. They seem to be working through it. That fund stopped redemptions, has held off redemptions. That's been about 6 months, but there is a wait list to get in. But they're not netting the two because they're waiting to work out their portfolio.
What's the term of the fund? Is it a 10-year fund? Is it
You don't know. It's long-term, and we are not in the zone of needing to worry about it. I would love to forward you the presentation.
Yeah,
Have you look through it.
Yeah, I guess, and I don't know anything about that. Is it an evergreen fund or is it a limited life?
It's not a limited life fund. It's not like it's more of it's not a private equity fund. It will continue. Right? I'll tell you, it's not my strongest suit, right? I'm much more comfortable talking about equities and fixed income and talking about some of the private equities. So real estate to me is just kind of not my strongest ground, which is why we've had them in so frequently to present to us.
Yeah, and I think the board might be interested because, one of the things that, and I realize this is on a 3-month lag on top of it, but, there's, I think, a belief among many that, these real estate funds really haven't,
Right.
really haven't.
Right. Haven't performed the way they were supposed to.
They haven't come to grips with really what's happening. They haven't changed their valuations maybe as quickly as they should. So, I don't know anything about this fund or what it looks like, but, all the things you mentioned.
Yep. It's
wherever their maybe their concentration is in housing and rentals, and that looks good, but, to the extent.
they are, yeah. I prefer to hand over and share with you the presentation they gave us. They are broad-based. That was the reason that they made the investment in the first place. The JRIP has moved over this long period of time away from a narrow investment thesis to a much more broad-based market exposure. And the real estate portfolio choice was done within that mindset. So whether it be apartments or industrial, commercial, the portfolio has all of you.
Mr. Curley?
Yeah, just to go back, we're bouncing between topics, but just to go back to the whole short-term rate thing, while we were talking here, I did pull up the current stiff rates and two months ago, when we were voting on the budget, the Connecticut stiff rate was 4.65%, and 8 weeks later, 2 months later, it's up 44 basis points to 5. So, not bad, in terms of our.
Thank you.
I think we actually.
What's that?
And the OPEB, now the market value,
73?
735.
Hmm.
But what is going to be managed more like? Or will it ever?
Well, the only thing that's different is it just has a higher weighting toward equities, right? And you'll see that begin to change because over time, because we've now made an allocation toward private equity for the OPEB. But it will take several years. I mean, it's now, I think, $225,000 has been invested in private equity out of a $10 million potential allocation. So over time, the allocations will change. Vanguard will pull out of equity, out of US equity, and put that into private equity.
Mhm.
So it will normalize and end up looking more like pension. But there's another reason why you would have OPEB with a higher weighting than pensions toward more of your riskier assets and toward equities. And that's if we're not taking redemptions. You know, we're not pulling money out of OPEB, right? We're just building into OPEB. Whereas with pension, you know, you're pulling money out of pensions in order to make the pension payments.
Okay, well, let me represent the taxpayers here and saying Vanguard on one hand is saying tilted towards equities.
Mhm.
We think that's the best strategy. You're gonna make the most money. Be tilted there. But yet, we're only, what's the total tilt here?
Oh, we're 70%.
Oh, 70%. I'm sorry. I was looking at the first number.
Oh, no, we're tilted.
Yeah, one more tilt.
Oh, we're there.
Okay.
We're there.
So because we don't have to take anything out, we're saying stay more tilted towards the equity
And allow them
money. Then we will pull money out to.
fund the private equity,
Oh.
right? And then over time, over that same period of time, right, we'll get to a point where then we'll resemble pension.
Okay, and the private equity investments, are they gonna be the same ones that are made on the pension side?
Yeah.
Not different.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Other questions from the board?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. Thanks for coming.
I'll send over the principal fund,
Yeah, that'd be terrific.
right, so you can distribute it, you can take a look at it.
All right. Thank you again. All right, so we will move on to item 4 to review the Board of Education fiscal 23 third quarter financial update. And we have the CFO for Fairfield Public Schools, Courtney Maurice. Welcome, Courtney. See you. The backup, I believe this, in online materials, I think it's 45. So I'll leave it up to you to take us through it, but if you're referring to schedules, maybe just point out the page numbers.
Sure, I do apologize that I don't,
We're not having on the
the
page.
header, okay, the page number version, but I'll figure it out as I go. So the Q3 report followed the same trend that we spoke about in Q2. We saw a favorable balance in the personnel, due to vacancies, which was challenging for us, but, because we weren't, we were unstaffed in certain areas. We continued to see an upward swing in the spending in substitutes because we were able to man those, positions, even though, we had the vacancies for teaching and the hard to fill positions in special education and, as well, educators as well. So that trend continued. What we were projecting, we continued to project in Q3. And the board, was agile and authorized us to do some transfers, in January in the Q2 to be able to, spend some of that money on things that we would have needed in the budget for future years. So if you recall, we had a conversation, we did transfers to be able to pre-buy some technology, right size, our purchasing of Chromebooks for students so that they would get a device at the start of middle school, the start of high school, and now it's timed, so that device will stay with them. This allowed us to front load that, have that experience, and we don't have such big dips, ebbs and flows. We also were able to answer the CSDE, Connecticut State Department of Ed legislation to purchase literacy materials as well. That was voted on in May. So because we were able to get these projections earlier on, there were 2 sets of transfers that the board authorized for us to do from our personnel services account, from our fixed charges account, which is our health insurance because of the vacancies, and from our transportation accounts. Those are the 3 areas where we had shortages that we were able to do those transfers, to do some major technology purchases, to do some major maintenance projects on the facility side that had been planned in the long term. And then thirdly, thirdly for the legislation for the literacy materials, which we're purchasing over 3, possibly 4 years. It depends on how much. We also have state grant money for that as well. So for the point of the report, we are still continuing to see that trend. We have done the majority of the transfers that we had hoped to ask the board for. In addition, what you won't see in this Q3 report is favorability on the utility side. I think I spoke with Frank from the town seeing that as well. We had a really, really warm winter when we projected the rates for gas and electricity for the usage. I mean, not just usage, but the actual rates. We were higher than the market because of the unpredictability or, supply chains. We were out of contract, lots of things happening last year when we projected. So we were seeing a lot of favorability on the utility side. That tonight, we have a Board of Ed meeting that my colleagues presenting some additional major maintenance projects. You don't see that here because that doesn't require a board transfer. And typically up until Q3, we would continue to just keep at flat budget when we do the presentation. But since we've done, as we do our Q3.5 or Q4 to prepare for year end, we've seen that additional favorability. You see in your backup 2 sets of reports. The reason being in Q2, we had proposed transfers totaling 1.3 million. And then in the presentation, we then spent it. So when you see a balance, and I'm looking now at page 45, 47 in your packet, and the header is Fairfield Public Schools Statement of Account by major classification. And you'll see that it went down to 241. That's because it was a methodology that I'll tell you, we actually corrected it. If you'll see on page 49, 50, 51, because it was disingenuous for us to show the balances with the transfer spent. So really, what we adjusted it. So what you're seeing is something that we presented to the board for the Q3, and then an adjusted version, which showed what the balances would have been had we not performed those transfers. So that's the page 51, yes.
That's the 2693 versus the 200.
Correct. Because the total amount of the transfers that happened, this is if they weren't to have approved the transfers, what we would have had in balances. Now Q3, because they did approve those transfers, you're seeing them partially spent out. But the point being, overall, we've been on trend with what we were projecting earlier on, and so now that we've done our Q3.5, we're still on trend for that, balance. So what went from 2.6 to 1.9, that's because we did transfer some of those funds and we did spend them out. So for example, we purchased $600,000 worth of Chromebooks. So you would see that lower the balance. If we didn't get the ability to do that transfer, you would still see that balance there.
Sure. So is this saying that we are currently expecting a $1.9 million surplus?
So I'll clarify that. So in personnel and in health insurance and bus, we still, at this point in time, had a $1.9 million surplus. The board authorized us to transfer those funds to additional the Chromebook purchases and the major maintenance projects. So when you see the Q4, that's going to go down to depending on what the board asks us to do, 0. So it's,
So I guess this isn't really a projection, right?
yeah, it's disingenuous to look at the balances because it's a projection were we not to have those transfers. And it's,
So we do expect to spend the transfer.
and we do expect to spend down the full transfer amount, correct, yeah. The piece that is now getting resolved this evening with our board is whether or not they want us to redirect the surplus utility funds to major maintenance projects, which wouldn't require a vote because it's in the major classification and our board policy says, you know, we can do that, but we do want to apprise them of our hope to do that and get their feedback on that. So that's about $1 million within major maintenance category. You wouldn't see here, but we're talking about with the board this evening, leading into our year-end planning.
I could just, and I'm sorry to keep jumping in, but so assuming that we're going to spend down. And when we looked at that last time, that was going to leave only 241,000. So, sorry, so assuming we're gonna spend that down.
Correct.
And then assuming that the utilities surplus is reallocated toward major maintenance, what does that leave in terms of the projection?
So for year end, we're anticipating, you know, 0 flat unless the board decides to ask us to not spend out the full $1 million for, you know. But we do believe we have identified uses for all of those funds. That include, so our surpluses, again, were just in personnel, fixed charges, their insurances, and the bus. So those 3 things totaled about 2.6 million, of which the board's already authorized us to do those transfers. We have spending plans. We've done encumbrances. We've worked with the town already to get contracts in place for all of that. In addition, we've got another roughly $1 million, because it depends on how hot it gets in June, you know, for air conditioning and things like that. But roughly maybe about $1 million that we have plans for that we will be able to pre-spend on major maintenance projects that are part of our ongoing capital plan.
So are these major maintenance projects ones that were in next fiscal year's budget, or were they not?
No, so when we plan for the budget, we have a priority list. So we have a certain amount that every year we do, but our list is much greater than that, and it's a multi-year list, yeah. And so with the board, we work and do priority 1, 2, and 3 from that list. So, you know, field upgrades or maintenance, like basic sodding for the fields is one of the things. Bathrooms, fixing the bathrooms at Alcorn Hill is one of the pieces. Things like that. So stuff that's ongoing that we have to do. We have a list and we prioritize that list. And in a given year, we only plan for a certain amount. And if we do have additional funds because of a warm winter or because of, then we go to that list and we pre-spend, but it's not like it's a critical something like a teacher that has to happen this year. It's a bathroom that has to happen in the next 3 years, and it'd be great if we could do it now.
And conversely, had we had a cold winter,
We would have to find
I've
other,
seen that before, what was in the budget for maintenance would have probably.
correct, yep, and so every year that's a little bit of a balancing act that we do, as we get to January, February, March, and the year end.
Okay, does anybody, since I've already interrupted Courtney, does anybody have any questions at this point before she keeps going?
Yeah.
Jim? Okay, do you want
No,
to?
I'm completely lost in this whole thing because you guys have all these surpluses, right? You keep spending them.
Yeah.
And, like, we don't really know about it. We don't know how you're spending surplus. So like when Dr. Title was here, who I thought did a phenomenal job, I'm not saying that her, Mr. Tisdale is fine, but I just want to be clear about that. Like we had utility savings. He gave them back to town because that's just a given.
Yeah.
And when he needed some extra money in some years, he came back and we always had his back.
Yeah.
What I can't figure out now is just all these surpluses, especially this year, once the beginning of the year, there's amounts that you knew that you didn't have, you didn't have all the whole retirement thing, more retirement than we thought. And there's all these pockets of money. Some of them equaling millions of dollars. And we don't really know what we're doing. Plus, I now realize there's a problem between this quarterly report and the town quarterly. Because when finance department and Caitlin put together our quarterly report, the summary, It's being projected as of that day that she knows about, or the town knows about. This is not that way. You know of things that are gonna be happening in the fourth quarter and ways you wanna allocate them. And we don't really have them to the dollar. We can't see them. I can't see these projects that you wanna put forward. So for example, what's your utility savings looking like right now? How much savings for the entire year on all utilities? What's that number?
Let me just take a step back. I just want to go one by one because I'll get to that.
Okay.
If you don't mind. The first part of, we have been projecting the same surplus throughout the whole year. We have identified the projects that very specifically, and they're all available in public documents for our board with a lot of back and forth comment about that. To say that there's pockets of money, the only pockets of money are related to the personnel surplus, specifically related to an unprecedented number of retirements that we've, produced a lot of material about explaining to the public and to the board. It's unfortunate that that happened this year because it's unfortunate for our students to have lost that talent. And for our school system. And we're doing a really good job recruiting. And we look like we're getting back to close to normal if you can look at what happened at year end. So that piece, I would say we've been consistent and we've been sharing that with the public through the board, all of the planned surplus, and we've done it much earlier than we had ever done.
Stop right there.
Yeah.
That period.
Mhm.
You've been sharing it at your meetings, which means that I have to go to every one of your meetings to be able to learn about it. And I'll tell you, I don't have time, nor do most members of this board with the amount of time commitment that we give this town. What I want to see is, what I would like to see is, I think this board needs to talk about it, is some type of running total of this as we're going forward with explanation.
So it's in your
How the
board back.
board on-
So it's, I don't know what page it is in the board packet, but it's the last two pages.
We have heard, I think, the last couple quarters about allocating that surplus from personnel services to technology and the Chromebooks. I mean, I do recall that.
Yeah.
I don't know if we got the same level of detail as was presented to the Board of Education. That might be helpful in terms of what you're looking at. Maybe we did. I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
Yeah,
But
it's,
that's the part I know. So I think the utilities is new.
Mhm.
And it's still not final. But obviously, we have to get through.
correct, yeah, I have to report to my board first, and so I can't report anything out, unfortunately, to this body before I report out to my board, so I report out to my board, not my board, the Board of Ed, on April 25th, so this is the first opportunity I had to do the Q3, and then I did report out at the Finance Committee, last week about our preliminary, because we're looking at the year-end spend out, which is why I feel comfortable bringing it here. It's not finalized number, but I wanted you to be aware of it because I think it's important in next year end. And there is detail, and I did provide this in the Q2 as well. But if you look at the very back page of my presentation, this is what we used the transfers for, the memo that we shared out on May 5th at that board.
Yeah,
I'll keep going, very like that.
Yeah,
Right there.
yes, letter.
yeah,
Memo to the file or whatever it is.
yeah.
Okay.
To Mr. Walsh's point, though, I do think, and I agree with you, Jim, I do think it's important to the extent you can, and I know you're doing things in a certain order, and things like spending transfers have to go through the Board of Education before you put in the projection. I do think it's more helpful to have a true projection as of whatever date we have, so I kind of like the last version.
Yeah, because I did too, yeah,
You know, to sort of retroactively cast Q2 in this light.
Yeah.
Like, if we made the transfers for technology,
we'll
that
spend,
was done with the
Yeah.
intention of spending them,
Yeah.
so to not put them there because they're not spent, it's sort of not a projection anymore, I'm not sure what it is. So
Yeah.
I would agree that the latest
should
information
show.
we have should be reflected.
yeah, and my challenge was, and you're right, I should go back and do that. My challenge was they hadn't voted on the transfers yet, so they asked me to not show the spending for the transfers, if that makes any sense. You're right, I'm gonna go back to the
Okay.
Finance Committee and ask them to.
Yeah, like, I mean, if it was gonna be a $5 million hole, for example, in the
Yep.
budget, but it wasn't gonna come up till April 16th.
Yeah.
Is that fair for our board not to know about it?
Oh, no, we would always show that if we're projecting a hole that big, absolutely at that, or even a hole at all. The purpose of this is to say, I would have a $1.9 million surplus if they don't vote on the transfers, and they didn't vote on them. In future, I agree, I shouldn't do it that way. I should say, I'm anticipating that you will vote on the transfers, and this is the total, and it would still be the 200K. I always say about 200K because you're never exactly landing the ship exactly perfectly, because people give up they close out purchase orders on June 29th, you know, that they thought there were bills coming and then they didn't. So we could potentially have about 200K, give or take. And I do know that Mr. Tassani is speaking with the town and with the board, first with his board about what we will do with the utility surplus. So it's not saying that we would spend it, we're sharing a full plan for they want us to spend.
And how much is that projected surplus? I think that's.
Utilities, yeah, approximately about $1 million, and a little bit of change between, commercial gas for heat, and then also electric.
What are you gonna do with that surplus?
So there are planned projects, that they're talking about with the board this evening, one of which is, an upgrade to Walter Fitzgerald for a kitchen remodel. One is, the balance, I believe the Osborne Hill bathroom, or whichever bathroom renovation is capital, came out much higher, than we projected. So the balance of that bathroom project, for example. One is a town turf field that, we've had some injuries on, and we've had asked to lay sod so that, it can be safer for the kids. And I don't recall the rest of the projects, but it's a list of projects they're talking about with the town this evening.
So we can see that after the board.
Mhm.
But this memo on the last page this is sort of pre-utility surplus.
Correct.
So this is the detail of the surplus that you've known about and have been telling us about.
Mhm.
This was about.
Yeah, there were two. So there was one from May 5th, that's the 1.3 that you see here, and then there was one on January 26th, which was for 1.3. And there's another memo. It's not in your backup here. It would have been in your backup in here too. But that came from health insurance, transportation, and the staffing. And it went to IT capital, HVAC repairs, our Tomlinson chiller project, which was funded with a grant, but it came in like double the cost because of the supply chain issues. An elevator at Fairfield Ludlow High School, and then the Fairfield scoreboard that came in higher than what we originally budgeted. So those were all funded with the transfers into. We did 75,000, yep.
It still came in higher?
And it still came in higher, yep. We're supposed to be getting revenue, so the upfront investment, then we'll be getting revenue to offset in the future.
Well, is there any way you could put together a document for our meetings where you could track from the beginning of July going forward what these surpluses are, how they're being spent? That the board's approving because,
Yeah.
you know, we're giving you money for improvements in your budget. I'm not saying everything is fixed in stone. However, by the list you're talking about tonight, clearly there's a lot of things that were not supposed to be done this year. Lots of them. And there is an argument that taxpayers should get their money back. This isn't just some rolling fund where you're just, the board is, I'm not saying you, the
Yeah.
board is going out and because of happenstance, we saved $5 million and you can just say, hey, we're just gonna spend the $5 million. I don't understand that as a taxpayer. I just don't understand it as a taxpayer. I don't understand it as a member of this board. That they could just, I know there's a state statute.
Yeah.
But these votes are being made without any consideration to the executive branch of this town, the Board of Finance, or to the legislative branch of this town. None, zilchy, nothing.
One option would be to have this closer, like the quarterlies closer to each other. I don't know, and just to get loud. Yes, when an appropriation is made to a Board of Education, the appropriation is made and the Board of Ed is statutorily allowed to spend it as they see fit. So the appropriation is there and things happen in a year. We don't have reserve funds. If you're not able to fully staff at the level that you expected, you will have a surplus in personnel. The reason I bring it in that way is because the way that our policy is written is that whenever there's a $10,000 shift between major classifications, which personnel, fixed charges, maintenance, support services, those are major classifications. It requires a vote by the board. So this is geared towards making sure that we get their approval in advance of making any of those transfers so that it's transparent about what our appropriations were for personnel, why, what happened that went off track for this year, the additional retirees. So for next year's budget, I can say that we reduced the attrition account to account for what's happening in the market right now. We have 19 retirees budgeted for next year. And so far, as of May 1st, we had seen 13. So as of a trend that we've seen in the past, we're roughly on track for that. Something could change, you know, at the end of the month, and then we'll get back and let folks know.
So can you, and maybe this will satisfy what Mr. Walsh is asking for. So this might be, so our next meeting is in 2 weeks or so, I think it's June 4th. But I think what might be helpful is, so this memo was helpful. But I think having a comprehensive one, which has the January transfer, this transfer, and then whatever happens with utilities. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, and Jim, you've been on the board much longer than I have. So I wasn't here when Mr. Title was here. But in my 4 years,
You gotta call Dr.
what's,
You gotta call Dr. Title,
Dr.
correct. So I'm gonna correct it. I'm gonna be.
Dr. Title is, but
Yeah.
when, you know, when Fairfield Public Schools has had shortages in the budget since the time I've been on the board, you've got one message from us, which is figure it out. Nobody said, we're gonna give you extra money to deal with it. Just find that money. So you got a certain amount, and if things happen that were beyond your control, no matter what that might be, it's like, figure it out. So I think that somehow, you know, it has to be consistent, right? If the board is obligated to deal with budget shortages,
Yeah.
then maybe it's appropriate for them to deal with budget surpluses. I'm not saying there shouldn't be disclosure and all of those things in discussion. But to say that, okay, if you have shortages, just figure it out, suck it up, you know, take from other projects you were going to do. But in a year where something goes the other way, because you have a warm winter or whatever, you know, you don't have that discretion. I'm not 100% sure I agree with that.
This is going way beyond this. The numbers are going way beyond this.
Really,
We just gave a grant that we just got in. That was a check made payable to the town of Fairfield.
Right.
Money that we already had spent.
understood.
Money the taxpayer that had already bought one time.
We've had
Now we get free
millions of
money and we
dollars.
pass it on. I
But-
want to see a whole list of everything from this
And
year.
I agree we should get that, but I do recall that we've had millions of dollars of negative variances in special education.
Mhm.
Millions of dollars.
Yep.
That had to be found and made up for elsewhere. So the magnitude of those shortages, you know, is not all that different from the magnitude of surpluses that we're seeing here. So all I'm saying is, I understand your point, there's a case to be made that yes, if there's a surplus, you don't spend it, but that I think is up to the Board of Education, that's their charge, it's not our charge. I agree that it's important to see what that is and what it looks like, because having that information available publicly and letting everyone understand what the Board of Education members are voting on and how they're deciding to manage that is important from a public perspective.
To me, this is a drastic change. For the last 20 years that I've been.
So.
It's just,
and I-
it's just the volume of money and the potential savings and the way it's being spent it's just a drastic change. And I tell you, I'm uncomfortable. I agree with funding the education, funding the education program. I think in 20 years, I have voted to pay for every single school project, which I think is about $1 billion. Except for one, nil. So I think that's just. everyone. And now I'm seeing these numbers and it's just concerning. It's not your presentation stuff. Like, hey, this is a good year. So we would like to talk to you about it. If the town ever came to us with this list, we'd be sitting here talking about each of these projects for about 3 hours.
Can I just say, we do that with the board. So, with the Board of Education, so maybe we have to.
There's always been a partnership in this town,
Yeah,
even in bad times.
Yeah.
Even when your health numbers went completely negative. There's always been a partnership. Hey, we'll fund you, we'll be your backstop, but manage reasonably your finances. If there's money left over, you've got to turn it over to the town.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's been a small amount, and a couple of times with Dr. Title, that was larger amounts.
and I think.
I just don't want to go down too much of a rabbit hole. I think what we need, would it be possible for this June meeting to
Yeah.
get a full summary?
Yes,
And then, that will be, and some of this we know about, because it's been communicated to us already, but there'll be a running total of, here were the sources of budget surplus. Here's where the Board of Education decided to invest that money.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. This board doesn't get to vote on that, but it can be presented and everybody can understand that.
I did just want to say one thing, if I may, through the chair, that the superintendent unfortunately is at a Board of Ed meeting this evening. Or he would be here speaking to this, because I do think we do have a great partnership, and I do think that he's very open to, I mean, I don't want to speak for him, but I know that he's very open to speaking with the town about what to do. And I think we're in that conversation. It's unfortunate that this is later, so much later than we had our quarterly Q3 conversation with the Board of Education, and now their meeting happens to be the same time tonight. But I do agree with you 100% that, we're in partnership with the town, and I wish the superintendent were here to speak to that, because he certainly feels that way. And one last thing, there is a detailed report that I didn't walk you through, but I think if I do a high-level summary, it will satisfy. That is on page 46. 51.
What is the change on the other copy?
I don't have page numbers on my copy, but. No, because this is what I sent to Jen, and she might have numbered it.
What is the title of the,
So the title is Statement of Account, Summary by Major Classification, Balances as of 3/31, 2022 year-to-date actual, and it's really small.
It's on page 51 of the.
Yeah. Of your packet, page 51 of what would have been, the 10.
okay,
Okay, so this does show the transfers with a little bit more detail. So if you look, for example, at personnel services, I'm just gonna walk through the top line. Staff salaries, the budget was 115. We did transfers of $786,000 because of the surplus that we had in staffing because of vacancies. So the summary, revised budget would have been 114. The year-to-date actual as of that date was 71 million, additional 42 encumbered. Projected additional obligations that weren't encumbered based on part-time. And then a projected balance. I showed the 930 balance, and then I showed again the 1231 balance and the 331 balance. So that 331 balance is because those transfers already happened. So if we added together, for example, the transfer plus the balance, that's the overall projected balance year-to-date for salaries. So, any level of detail we wanted to look into, we could. But the big picture is that it was salaries, it was life insurance, pupil personnel is on track to have a minor balance of 50,000, which is good in special education. The big balance you see in that pupil personnel expenses is related specifically to buses, which we talked about, which was part of our proposed transfers to the board. In addition, support expenses, even, but you can see we did transfer out 215,000. That was just a net change, because that transfer happened because of crossing guards that were transferred from the town. Initially, we were told they were contracted staff, but actually they were staff paid out of the staff line, so early in the year, we did that transfer from the security purchase expense to personnel. Maintenance, operation, and transportation, roughly even, but you can see that $792,000 of transfers have been transferred into that account, made within the major maintenance service accounts. The capital outlay, again, we're looking at closing even, with no surplus there. That did receive an infusion of $608,000 from that personnel surplus related to the purchase of Chromebooks. That did allow us to reduce our budget ask for next year. So our budget ask has been adjusted for busing. Remember the conversation as part of the, we hoped to run 116 buses, and I think 167 runs. We ran 102 buses and 161 runs. It was a pinch for families. However, that's what we were able to do. And next year, we didn't budget for the full 116 in anticipation that unfortunately it probably will continue, that we'll have a driver shortage. So we did adjust for that on the budget, even though we would be hopeful that we could budget for the full gamut. We didn't, because realistically, we know. Same thing with the staffing for next year's budget. We did make adjustments for attrition. And in the insurance, where we used to budget vacancies, and new hires, and an attrition amount in the insurance, we did adjust that in our budgeted numbers for next year. So I'd be more than happy to show a cumulative transfers, the projected balance post-transfer.
Yeah, the updated, I think the updated projection would be helpful. And then so the true projection with everything we know, and then a summary of surpluses in terms of their source and use.
Yeah, that's good. One other thing I did just want to say too, that we have changed slightly the methodology in that this happened in the past with the Board of Ed. It happened at year end. So we would do those transfers and then they would vote in them at the last day, and Tom would go crazy because we'd be sending like 1,000 requisitions over, saying, please process, please process. Part of the little bit of a struggle for half a minute we're having is also getting used to doing it earlier and just being a little bit more I think, more transparent about it. But that said, I can be more clear in the presentation. Yeah.
You had just said we had to take on a new budget line. Crossing guards?
Yes,
No, 250,000.
I don't remember the exact number.
It's some number of
Actually, it's
200.
scary. 255, I think.
255, I think it was something 250.
Oh, wait. No, it was less than that, 155? It was 155 came over.
You said you paid for that. Security expenses.
So
I think it was budgeted at
for
one line.
security of that, so it's just a transfer, you'll see.
Yeah, so, but that takes money out of the security expense line.
Correct, yeah. It goes into the personnel.
And that was done early in the year, correct?
Correct, yep.
Okay. And was it because of that removal of that expense, or you deducted that security expense line,
Yeah.
that you've been trying to put money in here, this May 5th, 2023
Mhm.
line? There are two security lines under the security, window covers, AI phone. Is that like somebody getting some of that expense back, security expense line?
No, that security expense line was just literally a one-to-one, so it was, this is how much we budgeted for the crossing guards in a contract line, and then we just transferred it into a personnel line. It actually wasn't enough, so we had to move other monies within personnel, because we were given like a correct projection when we did it. But yeah, so that's not, this is walkthroughs that the police department did to identify major critical security projects that need to get done. It includes some other things that are, anyway, these were identified by the PDS and put down.
So the FEMA grant, was that to replace some of the security expense line?
So the FEMA grant,
You said at that meeting
Mhm.
that you wanted to move some of the security. Jacobson was extremely clear, couldn't talk about one thing other than the word security, school security.
Are you, I
Yeah,
want
that's
to make sure I'm
something different, yeah.
understanding. I don't think anything got taken. The crossing guards were budgeted in the
Right.
security,
Right.
right?
Yep.
And then that budget for them was so they were to stay on
Right
the
size,
payroll
yeah.
versus being
So the
contracted.
funds were in your budget for every
Yes.
crossing guard?
We,
Okay, I thought there was money in the town side of the crossing guards, none in the town.
no, that got changed last year.
Okay, so previous year,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, because we got, the responsibility got transferred to us and we assumed it was, contracted and it wasn't. So one-to-one, we just moved that money.
They used to.
So-
Yes.
When you say security expense
Uh-huh.
in the budget, you meant crossing guard, that's also known as crossing guard, correct? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's where it got classified.
Okay.
Correct.
That's what you meant by security expense.
That's where it got classified. So when you look at the line, it's where it got budgeted.
Okay,
Yes,
so
correct.
there was never a line that could have just said crossing guards.
Nope, that's not the way we do it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, our chart of accounts is preset, so you have to find, we wouldn't create an extra line just for crossing guard.
So could we just,
I want to go on the grant side of their budget too,
or-
their grant side of their presentation.
yeah, before we do that, just for the record, can we, so we will follow up at the June meeting with a projection and, the cumulative.
And while we're on that topic, I just wanted to make one observation, and maybe a suggestion that might help the situation when we come into a surplus. So as I look at this and you see the surplus materializing, to me, it would make sense that, okay, so that means next year or the year after that, that maybe there could be something cut out of that budget. And so, but we don't know that because we don't know what's scheduled and what's projected to be spent next year, the following year, for maintenance or technology. And so one of the things that I think would be helpful would be to have kind of a plan of what's needed that you can tell for those types of things that, maybe one time in nature, but may have a lifespan of multiple years, to be able to see that plan so that when you're talking this year about taking some of your surplus and transferring it to a maintenance item or a technology item, I can see, all right, we had that on your.
You sent that to the.
Yeah, so, yeah.
2 or 3 years from now, and that, so that can be, and I think that came up with regard to the Chromebooks, but other things have a more, comprehensive.
Yeah,
That was
we
provided.
can send that, yeah.
Sent that to me, I distributed that to.
And we also, as part of, unfortunately, it's like 26 pages, but I can highlight any section for you that you like, but it's part of our backup to our budget. All of those documents, each of these elements is explored in great detail in those documents. I could do a better job summarizing it for this body, but, yeah, so we talk about, for example, personnel, how we budgeted last year, what we're doing this year, and how that impacts the budget for next year. In those documents related to attrition, related to substitutes, related to retirees and assumptions around retirees and vacancies and time to hire. All those pieces are, in great detail in that backup, including the multi-year schedule for major maintenance projects. Yeah, and we did have those conversations as part of the budget about the technology because the initial ask was much higher to be able to buy all the technology that we wanted, and we did reduce the budget in anticipation that we were going to be able to revise some of it this year. Also the literacy materials as well.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I get that there's some consternation around this, but, if we think about it, I personally like having this information on. On the town side, we're figuring out what to do with our surpluses 6 months after the year's over. And we're retroactively changing the budget
Yeah,
and then spending,
we're not allowed to do that.
and that is far after
Yeah.
the next year's budget is actually done. So, and I know that's just the way we've done things, and some of it goes to surplus, some of it doesn't, some of it won't spend, but, I think that, and I know that the Board of Ed has always waited until the last minute, left everything discretionary put to the side just in case something happened. This year it was clear at the beginning that you had surplus. You discussed it with the board, you took action on it earlier, you reflected the information from those surpluses in your next year's budget, so, I think Mr. Walsh has a fair point about, is it right to spend that money? Maybe we spent some of the money, not all of the money, like how is the, Board of Ed arriving at their decision? I think, yeah, it's unfortunate Mr. Testani couldn't be here, I certainly understand, but, we can have this.
Yeah, and it's given me food for thought, so thank you for how to
Yeah.
present this a different way, because I don't want to convey that this administration or the Board of Ed is in any way not wanting to partner with the town and be,
Well, that's always been done at the end of the year. I think it's always a good time to be quite honest with you, to see how did the year end up?
Yeah.
And then have that conversation. As opposed to doing it along the way and then people are like piecemealing and stuff and we can't remember like what the reasoning was. I presume all these projects, including the one being voted on tonight, were on that list of, what did you say, it's 30 pages,
no, so,
26 pages, I can't remember what you said.
no, so the board only has to vote on transfers that occur between major classifications. So they voted on the January 26th, which was the Q2, presented at the Q2, and the May 5th, which is part of your packet here. They voted on those two sets of transfers. This evening, what they're discussing is how they would utilize what the utilities surplus, what they hope for the plan for the utilities surplus, and being presented off in major maintenance projects that on a list that has been updated, that they usually see at year end. Typically, we would do this and just make the transfers and do all of the stuff at year end and then tell you about it later. So we wouldn't we would just go negative in all the accounts and then say, please vote on the transfers. I wouldn't do business that way. I don't feel comfortable with it that way. I don't think it's right to do business that way. So that's why I follow the procedures to get the approval for the transfers before we do the spending.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
Be general or just on what we're showing?
On this, do you have more that you want to walk us through, or do you just want to take additional questions? I know you had some questions on the revenue side.
I have a grant side.
Like I said, okay.
Yeah.
You
Grant-
want it,
grant
something to
revenue.
walk us through? or
No, we can go straight to the grants, yeah.
So, Mr. Walsh, could you just, take us to the page you're gonna?
Sure, mine says 10 of 21. The bottom.
Yeah.
See if I can find it.
Yeah.
Call it up on my computer.
It says state revenue, grant revenue and expense side programs.
Following home is on page 67 of 134 PDF. So, Courtney, I just want your help. This is going to be a good one.
Okay.
So, we authorize you to transfer the grant meeting.
Yeah.
Where's that on? I just had a quick look through here.
It's not here yet because I don't think it was voted on by all the bodies from, as I understand it, still requires RTM vote.
That was over a month ago.
Yes.
Okay, so
Oh, okay.
it wouldn't have been on,
Okay.
yeah.
So what will that be called? Ask you the same question. You do expect to have that police representation where you would have that spent possible by the end of the year.
Ms. Jacobson said that, but I had a subsequent conversation with Mr. Testani and that wasn't necessarily his timeline, so, I don't know. So I'd have to go back and find out about the timing.
So we'll have to wait till the fourth quarter, and then this should show up in this statement of account grant revenue expense by program, correct?
Correct, or I'd be happy to bring it at the June meeting also, since we have an update there. I can add it in, run it.
Yeah, I just wanted to see where it was and how it was already spent.
I don't know. I'm gonna work with it, like Mr. Testani on that, so, I'll find out about it for our next meeting.
I think, based on our discussion with, because I raised this too, and I thought that it would have to be a carryover if it wasn't spent, but
Yeah.
John Staffstrom said no, grant.
Yeah.
Once it was approved,
Mhm.
he spent in due course.
Yeah,
So,
but I wanted to see it all spent.
Understood.
Spent.
Yeah.
And, so, Madam Chairwoman, are you saying that, I thought you were saying that, kind of like that they were spending surplus over the years, is that correct? Is that what you were trying to say? Trying to understand that.
so I think my personal opinion
Mhm.
is, if you know you have surplus, then it makes sense to determine during a year whether or not, that should be redirected. I mean, I tend to think that, and I'm not saying that this is what's done, but, trying to, waiting until June and then just trying to spend down a bunch of money, just to spend it down is not a good practice. It doesn't, that's not a good way to do things, because I think if the money's going to spend intelligently and productively, is particularly in maintenance projects, these things likely need lead time. And the process should be thoughtful. And if it's going to be spent the same year, then I think there should be, and if you're confident there's going to be a surplus to spend. Yeah, I think that those decisions, we can make better quality decisions if we are making them more timely versus waiting until the last second. Now, I understand in the past, we wait on things because there was a lack of predictability in some of the numbers. But then there was this flurry of purchases, at the end of June. I'm not convinced that's a great practice, personally. So that's just my perspective. Now, that's no commentary on any of the details of what's being done here. I think, the Board of Education, I'm sure, has gone through the process, hear about it. But I think it's a little bit different than what happens on the town side. I think the town side, we have a different process. We're the first, we're the approving board versus Board of Education, so we tend to do things differently. We've also spent the money differently on the town side. It's gone toward more one-time projects, capital projects, replenishing OPEB, or whatever the heck we've done with the years. We have done that. But I think if it's going to be spent in an operating budget, I'm always skeptical that money spent, at the last minute, just to try to get it spent is
My concern is that, they can change quarter to quarter, we're seeing them change drastically quarter to quarter.
Right.
I don't know what's gonna happen, your insurance numbers, are good. They could be horrible. And you could have spent surpluses that you thought you had in the first quarter, in the second quarter. And then you could have spent $2 or $3 million of surpluses you thought you had.
Yeah, so.
Then you're running to the town saying, save me in the fourth quarter, because the numbers have come in and they're horrible. We need an infusion of cash. And that's one of the reasons I think we've always waited to the end.
It's a tough job. I mean, in honesty, it's a tough job, but I mean, we live and breathe the numbers. We look at them on a weekly and then monthly basis, and there's certain things that you can say in January aren't gonna come back. Like, what you've spent to date, what your remaining obligations are, what your assumptions are about the vacancies, which is why we did a January and then a true up in May, and there'll be one more final true up at year end. But I do think in January, there's certain things you do know. You do know your health insurance and your personnel. You know what positions have been vacant year to date, and there's a savings associated with that. And that's just, factual. You can't hire above your, authorized budget number. So those are real savings. And then there's just an assumption about the vacancies for the rest of the year. So it's just a constant looking at it every 2 weeks and then every month. You're always looking at the new projection.
But you can't predict something happens with one of the buildings.
Correct.
On a medical side, or a health side, or a toxic side.
Correct.
That
So,
we saw happen at McKinley School when I was still here, where we were literally, people didn't want to go to school.
Yeah.
We were like needing to move them to other schools, which cost millions of dollars.
which is why you want a good partnership with the town, because there are things that do come up, which is why you do want to have very accurate projections, and you do want to hold aside some money, which we do have, which we do. Yeah.
Okay. How much do you have always on the side?
So it depends on, so right now, we have the 1.1 million that hasn't been obligated in utilities, and some of those are year-to-date realized savings. So, I mean,
I think that's my concern about spending it along the way, is that stuff can happen.
mhm.
And Charlotte says, the new partnership that I'm starting to see come up is we will spend it the way we want to spend it, because we have the legal right to do it. Well, then, if I see that happen, then you need money, I'm gonna be like, I'm really sorry about it.
I have to say, I don't,
You know the way we work here, Miss Laboria.
I don't think.
You and
that's
the
a
board
partnership
should really
with
put some things together,
You know.
figure this stuff out.
With the select person, I don't, I'm.
I mean,
don't think that's.
I do want to move on. I understand Mr. Welch's concern. I think that the source of the surplus matters, you know, you know, somebody had said in February, gee, it's been a warm winter so far, so let's spend this utility surplus. That would be absurd, obviously. You know, there's some level of some of these things, and in others, there is not.
But I say if they spend $1 million prior to January, and then we get hit with an unexpectedly bad winter.
Right. But they have.
Where a roof collapses.
Yeah.
And all sorts of stuff starts happening, and there's more heat, whatever. For them to have spent $1 million, and then all of a sudden magically need $1 million?
No,
That,
I mean,
that would be.
Well,
I do say like,
Unbelievably embarrassing.
Again, I think, you know, we're not the first people to think about this. I'm sure the board is thinking about this. I'm sure management's thinking about this on both sides.
I've just never seen management think, I've just never seen the management board think like this. So that's why I'm the issue, because this is not traditionally the way we've done it. And John, you've been around. We just never done it.
This is a little unusual.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's a little
I'm not
unusual.
saying it's wrong,
I think it's unusual because, and we had an unusual circumstance this year where we had this big number of retirements.
Yeah.
And again, that, you know, there's things that can be unpredictable, and then there's things that.
you can predict, so I just want to say,
And so I agree with you, but I'm sure you haven't spent all your money on maintenance.
no, I
I mean,
mean,
things that are gonna happen in Q4, so I think there has to be some level of.
I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I've been doing this for 20 years. So there's some skills that you acquire when you've been doing it for 20 years. So I think one of our challenges here, I will be frank, in Fairfield was special education. We didn't know what we were doing when we were doing the projections. And we still have some challenges. But I'll be frank, like we've right-sized that budget, we have, and there could be another challenge next year, but I think I didn't like the way that we were monitoring it in the past, and so that's a big, big factor. We always had to hold aside a ton of money because we weren't sure what was gonna happen in special education until the very end of the year. And I don't think we're in that position right now, and I think that's a good thing. So that was a huge factor. The swings in special ed in the past were millions of dollars, you know, from quarter to quarter, and we're just not seeing that anymore, because we're very clear about what our revenue assumption is, what our expense assumption is, what our year-to-date is, and what our projections are based on the remaining months left. So we're constantly refreshing that and refining that. And we have communication about the children that we're seeing in the system and the needs of the needs on a regular basis. So I think that, I hope that continues to be much better, but I think that was a big challenge for us.
And I want to, let Mr. Crowley speak, I do just want to, at least from my perspective, when I looked at it, even though this surplus was identified in January, these Chromebooks haven't all been purchased yet, have they?
So half, we did half, yep, because we thought we were doing half and then we waited. Yep, and then we did
That's what I was looking at. So you've managed it in terms of leap years. I mean, I think you have to.
Yeah.
Because things can happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a comment and a couple of comments, a couple of questions. But I do this is my second year on this board, and I don't have the history that you have, Mr. Wallace, and I appreciate that history is important. I was of the opinion or understanding that much like we saw last year, there was I think it was a $3.5 million budget challenge on the special ed side. And yes, the answer was go figure it out, find it from somewhere else. So I agree with you that to the extent that the surpluses are large, it does kind of sit uncomfortably for me that it's just spent. But I kind of was of the opinion that, you know, the challenge you have to manage and the surplus too. But having said that, I do think history is important. And I don't know if you have these records, but, or if the town does, but I think one thing that would be really insightful for me, and I think the board and the general public generally, is going back 10, 15, 20 years, whatever the data is that's available, how many times did the Board of Ed turn money back to the town and how much? And how many times did the Board of Ed come back to the town asking for more money? And I think if we look at a broader spectrum of time and understand the frequency and the magnitude, I think that will help us kind of size this issue a little bit better. So if
I think that'd be great.
Yeah,
I think what would be great to add to that,
Yeah.
would be during the same year period. How much did the board spend writing invoices for the month of July, June? I mean,
Well, I actually have that, because we looked at that for last year, because I wanted to go back, and I actually was just looking at that today. So we do have a history going back to 2000, actually, of that document goes back that far.
And one of the benefits of having a large budget, I recognize that the Board of Ed is roughly 2/3 of the total town budget, right? And one of the benefits of a large budget is that not every line item is gonna line up, and you do have the flexibility to manage to that number. If you had to manage to a much smaller number and a big ticket item came up, that's harder to manage. But I imagine that the frequency that the Board of Ed has come back to the town to ask for money, absent the McKinley example, because that's really a bigger issue. It certainly could not be foreseen or certainly couldn't be avoided once it was recognized. But I do think that would be helpful if you could provide that.
I'd be more than happy. And I do want to advocate one last time for the 1 or 2%, only because that does help with this. I mean, in some way, shape, or form, when you set up a reserve account, to be able to not have to land on a dime and still, it's town money, so the town could say, we want to put it aside for some shared project or whatever it is. It helps you the next year to be conservative, to have that up and down. So we have a bad winter, we socked away 500K. You know, next year, it's really cold and something blows up, the town has that money to pay for that, you know, so I do like the reserve funds. I do think it's helpful to a town to have that, but, I know that that's been a challenge here in the past, for whatever reason.
All right, did you have any other questions on the grant side? Okay, other questions from the board? All right, well, thank you. Yeah, and thank you for everything you're doing and, for, all your work to try and, provide the transparency that.
Yeah, I apologize that that wasn't obvious, but I will in the 2-week company meeting, have a much more clear document, and thank you for the feedback about the history and how it's changed.
Okay. So we will move on to item 5, to review the town Q3 financial update. We have Ms. Rossi and Mr. Schmidt present to us. I can. See. Yeah, so for the benefit of the public, the posted backup begins on page 80 for this item, 80 of the PDF.
Thank you. Okay, page 80 is the page we all know and love so much. Summary, back to March 31st. We're almost months beyond that. So this is everything we know to date. Just to look at the bottom figures just for a second. So as of the end of Q2, which was December, we were anticipating the 5.3, which did not include the footnote of ECC savings that we had discussed, because those folks kind of came in Westport and we weren't sure where we were going to land. We did land around the 400, we think, mark, with the estimated savings, just due to the delayed opening of Westport coming on board later. So really that would have brought up our Q2 increase in fund balance to about almost like a 5.758 figure. So looking at the same line, we're kind of estimating about a $7 million increase now as of Q3, which is about a $1.3 million favorable variance from Q2 if you add in that extra savings from the as you can see, there's a couple of big changes, not a lot. So we'll start with the revenue side where we normally do.
current, prior, and interest. We're keeping that at, we're thinking about 500, which was the 500 we've had on there all year due to the senior tax relief credit that we knew about, way in early fiscal '23. As you guys know, the budget collection rate did increase from fiscal '22 to '23 from like the 98.7 to the 98.9. We are, as of the end of April, actually 0.75 basis points higher than this time last year. But we are, on the flip side, lower in our prior and interest collections. So that favorability is kind of being offset by being under budget with the prior and interest collections. So I'm really leaving it at the 500, which was the senior tax relief credit that we knew about back in Q1.
Does that mean the collection rate is 99.65 right now?
Then collection rate as of April, the end of April, I can tell you.
No, the prediction, I guess, for the end of the year, because it said that it's gonna be 98.9 and you're.
98.9 is the budgeted collection rate of fiscal '23.
So then I add the 0.75 higher.
That's as of April.
Yep.
So as of April, we're at 98.09% collected, which is 99.36% of the budget.
Yep.
Okay. But as of last April, just to kind of give it to, you know, the mill rate's different and everything's different. We were at 98.55% of the budget and the collection was 97.24. So we're 0.75 higher than where we were last year.
Oh.
And we're slightly lower in terms of the percent of budget, if you're looking at that, because the collection was clearly different.
So what's the estimate for the end of the year, what the collection rate will be? What's the estimate for June 30th?
Well, I'm saying if the intent, so the intent to liens just came out, or we sent them out in May. If they fully offset our unfavorable expected variance in prior and interest, those two were gonna offset, so we're gonna, I didn't do the math, so we could take the current year saying that we're gonna be 0.75 over, but on prior, we're gonna be under.
Yeah, I'm just looking for current year.
$500,000 is your projection.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
So, to Jim's question, if you add $500,000 to the tax revenue, what does that translate into in terms of?
Oh, I didn't, right.
It's something more than 98.9. It's 99.
Okay. Right, because there's favorability on the current, and then we're way
Right, this
under
is-
prior. That's everything.
This is everything.
So my favorability on the current is gonna offset my unfavorability on my prior and interest.
So we don't have the math, but you're estimating that we're gonna be 500,000 over.
Yeah, in total. It's current, prior, and interest. Yep. We'll know more early June as those intent to liens went out and he's collecting now, because nothing really, he doesn't really collect anything in June. He's collecting now in May, he's collected about $500,000 on the intent to liens and
Maybe
regular
some of
collections.
to Jared, I don't know if somebody should answer this question. What is that $500,000 in addition to the budget translates into?
Investment income, obviously, that's what we've been, you guys kind of discussed with Carolyn. Projection was 2 million favorable as of Q2. It's up slightly to 2.5. Our actual, through April, actually, we're actually over budget by 2.2 already. So we still have May and June is when we do the mark to market, because that's a quarterly calculation. So the month of April, just to give you a sense, we took in $533,000 in interest income.
So this could be conservative.
Yep. It's not for the mark to market, depending on where we land at 2:30. So that's probably half of our favorable variance.
When are we gonna talk about what you said, Jared, we were gonna talk about? Part two, is that now? Talk about it another
You
item.
want to talk about that now?
Well, you tell me. I'm not trying to jump in. I just don't want to get past it.
Well, that's,
So what was the question?
that's for next, you're talking about next year.
You're talking about budget 24?
Yeah, we need to talk about that. Where did you want to talk about that? If it's not here, maybe it may not be regardless of these results, maybe it's their topic.
No, we can talk, we can try and figure it out. I'm happy to talk about it here.
Okay.
And I think since the budget was adopted, our stance hasn't changed
Okay.
much. Really, we're talking about the stiff investment rate. Project that forward to next year. Maybe that's almost a, could predict, because it's so high now, could be a predictor. Start to go negative. At some point, we're gonna max out. It's gonna have to start coming back to normal. So, we're obviously not in and haven't started next year's budget yet. So, but I don't take that rate increase over the last whatever, 6 weeks, 2 months to be an indication of what's going to happen this fiscal year.
The rate cuts was come from a higher starting point, right? So I think it is somewhat low.
Right, but those, we were predicting those. Those were things that were being anticipated when we were rating. No, I'm saying that the rate increase, the height that we're seeing now was predicted, and that's something that was anticipated. Because Chairman was talking about the base and the base being higher.
Yeah.
I think that was projected, and that was anticipated, that the base would go up. So we're taking the same stance. We had a low rate increase, heavily reliant on investment income to balance the budget to pay for the expenses that we had. And to me, it was a better decision to take a conservative stance on investment income, given that we had a increase, and to not set us up for potentially a tough year next year in budget. We're definitely not going to have an increase, and may actually see decreases in the following.
And I just to respectfully, I'm not sure it's productive to relitigate the budget discussion. Maybe what would be helpful, and maybe we could do this in June, is we could get an update on the portfolio. So Janny, we've invested money, and that money's in bonds that have a term that's going to carry us through next year. Let's see what that looks like. Because again, we budgeted at an effective interest rate of 3.4%. So it'd be helpful to know that at least the fixed income part of our portfolio, which is currently invested in bonds that are going to carry into next year. What does that look like?
Sure.
And then we can see, because I think last year, and I had just pulled up my spreadsheet, I can't remember what our
And I think that
and let me just quickly, I think, what we looked at was our bond portfolio at the time of the budget was about 113 million. Our money market was about 57, so it was about 2 to 1. And so the more volatile piece is that money market amount, right? Which we budgeted at 3.5% interest. And the other piece is one that's more predictable. So I think in terms of going, maybe to get to the question, if we want to monitor that going forward, we should look at it in that light. What does the JD portfolio have in it? What do those bonds look like? What's the duration? How's the money market performing? So we can judge the risk there. Because I personally think we might have, if we have downside in one, we might have upside. So.
right, and the Janny investments are, I think, are going to stay pretty steady, and are going to change. I think that was a conversation that we had.
Right.
And what we was talking about was the money market, which, again, I think anybody has a crystal ball knows what's going to happen.
So in terms of monitoring it, if we could, I think that some of the information we had for the budget was helpful, that we had in the budget backup. It showed our investable income, in those categories and how they were performing in the rates. So I think that would probably be, going forward. And we could start looking at that, as we could start looking at it in June, but it's really a next year thing. Maybe we pivot back to the quarterly review though.
Well, are we gonna be getting an update, like the guy that you was before, I don't wanna mispronounce his name.
Yeah.
Will you get an update from him on where things are gonna be going?
We
Yeah,
can,
yeah.
we got an update just to, that's part of my quarterly, because he helped me put together this. He was saying for fiscal '24, he was anticipating between low yield at 3.93, high yield at 4.23 for fiscal '24.
Was he anticipating any bed increases?
Well, there's
Or
been one.
Any bed decreases? Any bed decreases?
Well, I don't know which assumptions we're going in, but
Well,
clearly.
you asked him what his
Well,
assumption.
he can probably come back and talk about the whole thing, but as
But
Mr.
again-
Curley said, we're at 5% for STIP. We have $32 million in there right now, so that's clearly making a ton of money in.
If the Fed reduces rates, is STIP gonna change their rates? Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's,
So that.
We're at 5.5 right now, so it's a lot higher than what it was.
Also about 5.5%.
that's not where the volatility is. The volatility is gonna be in the money markets and what we're invested in.
Okay, can we,
So the Janney money, and I'm watching these investments come through. And, you know, their maturities of, you know, out to 24, 25, 26. And so those are pretty fixed. So that's not gonna be where the volatility gets on the Janney side. It's gonna be what we put into STIP or what we have in MT and what kind of rate that's getting.
exactly, all right, so listen, guys, not to be, let's get the meeting back under control. Please wait to be recognized to speak so that, and let's try to stay on topic. On that topic, again, doesn't matter what the STIP's doing now, we're budgeted at 3.4%. You said that, he said 3.9 to 4.2 or something. Let's keep monitoring it. Does it sound to me like we've got a forecast that we're gonna be in trouble on that? And we'll continue to monitor it, but that's a next year budget thing. So, let's get back to,
Okay, conveyance, it's projected to be a little bit worse than what we said in Q2. Negative 300, that from negative 100 to negative 300. Obviously, the decrease in the refinancing activity, less inventory in the market, which we're kind of talking about. We're at 1.8 through mid-May, which is 700,000 under budget. And Betsy said she's hopeful that a piece of large property on Tungus Hill, the scapular ship, may come in June. So that is slightly worse than where we were in Q2.
that large property built into this $300,000. Yes, that doesn't include $300,000.
Yeah, she's not sure, she doesn't, there's a couple parcels and she's not sure which ones are actually gonna sell, so that was why, but yes, that's all we can.
Mr. Hamilton, question?
Yeah, where's this estimate come from?
Oh.
Counselor, 100%.
In addition to, we look at, with myself and the budget director, look at activity from May and June of the prior year. In April, and we kind of come to, yeah.
What, do you know the number of houses that are for sale now versus they were?
Last
Can we
year,
find that out?
yeah, I could ask her.
Okay,
I'll get that information.
and it'd be interesting to know the value of those houses that are for sale. To know what the gains tax might be.
I don't know if she has that info, but I could ask her.
Okay.
Building permits, about the same as where we were in Q2. Kind of the same things that we've seen, few dorms come in, apartment buildings, so he kept that right on track. The big ones had already come in at the end of Q2. A few that he was tracking, there was a FairTV dorm that came in recently in May. Illicit Brewing is only for a demo permit as of now. There's a few other big ones that are either in TPZ or inland wetlands. As you guys know, the fiscal '24 budget had been reduced by 300,000. Kind of takes that into consideration. Park and rec revenue actually went up a little bit by 86, not a lot. Most of that is attributable to Penfield, locker rentals, beach stickers, and the other customers.
Sorry, and I guess it's in the detail. The 665.
Yep.
Not how much it went up by, but the driver.
Yep.
Of that is what?
Penfield, because we didn't know in Q2 that was gonna be open.
Right, but that's not 665,000.
Oh, no, you want all of them? Golf is a big one. For mansions, 133 of it. If you want to know the whole, 665. You know, beach stickers is 100, daily parking is 100. The rec programs is in at 70, which we knew about. Penfield lockers, which I just discussed, and a lot of golf. Part three fees was 50, yeah, it's all in the retail, Smith Richardson ID. Golf fees at Smith Rich are 145. A little bit less on the driving range, but a lot of it's golf, and I would say basically golf, to beach parking, but, Berg is 133 of that.
Yeah, I feel like we have a lot of, we always see these numbers in parks. Then when we're doing the budget, we're always comparing to the prior year budget, instead of the prior year actual, which was always considerably higher.
Yep.
So that would be, I think an important piece of information to look at going forward. And it's it's decent, and although there's some expense at the bottom.
Expenses went up by more than.
Expenses
revenue,
went up,
so
yeah.
actually, that-
The net was $30,000 difference, it's a decrease actually.
Wait, where are you? I'm seeing expense 379.
Well, it's the
Versus
difference.
262.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's a-
And I'm
One-
just focused on the year to date. Compared to budget, revenues are 665 higher, expenses are 379 higher. So Mr. Wolf?
Speaking to golf revenues, golf players, why would projection be going up? If we had $145,000 over on revenue for golf fees. Park revenue is gonna be 25,000
Our revenue's been down for a few years.
below, but below budget.
Our revenue's been down for the last couple of years.
So then why does it keep over budgeting?
I don't know what happened. I don't know what the budget is for fiscal 24. I don't pay attention.
Well, you know, for the last 2 years.
We've been over budget. Why are we budgeting what we're budgeting? That's, I don't. But we've been under budget, but yet their ID or their, golf fees have been way over.
Yeah, I know, so.
If people are taking golf carts, I don't know. Maybe they want to walk, maybe
No,
COVID.
no,
I think COVID was an issue.
I get it, but it's just like, then why do we keep it over budgeting? Why do we?
I don't
keep-
know what you did
why
in
do we keep
24. I
it-
don't know if your people were budgeting.
I
I don't know if you over budgeted in 24. I can't answer that question. I know in 23, you were over budgeted.
So Jared, are we over budgeted in 24?
But we don't know yet. Has the budget gone down?
Yeah. I mean, we brought the budget down on cart revenue to be commensurate with what Ms. Bossi said, which was people don't seem to be taking carts.
I can look at it and I can tell you,
If you look at the 24 budget, it's a higher or lower than 24.
actually,
No, that's fine. We can continue on. In regards to Parks and Rec. That will be.
Yes. Do you have another question on that?
So it turned out to be a good idea that we opened up, Penfield for the season. Spent $40,000 on the tent, but we made 200 something with revenue.
Talking about Burr?
Excuse me, Burr. That's part of Parks and Rec, right? How much the revenue number on that for the season that we did decide to open?
Burr, from what I've been told, the estimated revenue is 133, and the total expense is going to be 80.
Okay.
So they're netting about 53 or something.
And do we have any sense of whether they've rented anymore? Let's see, there's a certain number of spots that are there.
I think they've taken in a couple, but I can ask Anthony.
That'd be- That's all I have. Thank you.
State revenue, just slightly higher than what it was due to actual coming in slightly higher, about $98,000. And other actually went down a little bit. A little bit unfavorable facility use charge at the transfer station, running below budget by about $35,000. Light penalties are running under budget. They're caught up in just getting, the process from what the building inspector said, about 15,000. And I believe Jared's, in the process of renegotiating the parking agreements. So those are the main drivers of the 100,000 less favorable than other.
questions on revenue, Mr. Wall?
Is the scale, count up scale weighting revenue line, represents 8 months of revenue lower than how much received? Is that a consistent pattern? Are we seeing less garbage coming in? On the scale?
The scale weighing is normally offset, the revenue is offset by the expense to the hauler, so those normally net out. This is people coming in.
Yeah.
This is revenue. Is the tonnage less than what it was, last year?
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't look at tonnage on a monthly basis.
And the, authority lease. So we're negotiating a rate with them?
We are. So we're looking at their financials now, and, we're also trying to look at some, analogies, because I feel like the amount that we put in there has just been kind of historical, and we've built on past agreements, but I don't know that there's a lot of rationale behind it. And so we're trying to develop a plan.
When's the lease?
So the lease has pretty much been renewed, from year to year. There have been, which is, another thing that we're looking to clean up. A lot of the agreements have been like an email from parking authority to the town saying, this is how much we want to pay, or how much we so, talked to Attorney Baldwin about, cleaning up that lease and kind of starting, place. Just to people come up with a schedule perhaps. Last year, to your question, correct, last year, we did the same thing, we kind of built upon what had been done. Estimate upon that. So I would say there wasn't a formal agreement, but there was kind of an understanding what it would be.
Is that a yearly thing? I mean, yeah. Or is it?
And so the issue has been with COVID. Couple of factors. COVID, Mill Plain lot, the Yale, which just ended last month. So now we're trying to figure out what to do with that this time. See much need for it, given the interaction numbers down the park. But I'm concerned about entering too long of the lease with them, given that we are still kind of in a period. We're still seeing how whether companies are going to continue to allow the vote.
Yes.
Participation or park people come in. That's a factor. So I would say in this next lease agreement, I would want it to be for a year or two.
All right. And there's no plans right now for, I used to call the X7 lot, but no plan lot. State, or not the state, but Yale.
Yeah, there's no plan for it.
That can be built in the lease or not built?
That will not be built. They will not be
So that, so they won't be some lot.
That's right. And to date, they are far from needed.
Okay, so what do we do?
We're having this conversation about now.
Okay. And it made me think, where do we stand with the analysis of what's going on with the electricity usage? Solar, and the electric charging stations that are owned by the town. Where do we have a policy? Have we had a policy? How much is it costing the town for those? You have that?
So we have the audit that was done back in November, December, that submitted to you. The number, if my recollection is right, that it was something on the order of $5,000 a year. It's not a large amount of money.
And it was gonna cost us a fair amount to convert those into credit card stations, if I recall.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking, we don't have a policy yet, and that's one of the things that we're possibly having somebody come in to manage those stations. So the town, we don't have to spend our resources on it.
Somebody else can be.
Have somebody else maintain them,
Yeah.
operate them as needed,
Mhm.
and then the town will get a share. So that, but it's not a lot.
Sounds like a good idea.
I'm sorry,
Sounds like a good idea.
what, to hire somebody?
Yeah, they're fun.
Yeah, I mean, if we can find the right company. that comes. Just the right revenue share.
Okay, expenses? Expenses. First line is the vacancy slash churn. We're favorable, we're thinking about $1 million to budget, but 250 when you compare it to Q2. At the end of, basically at present time, there's, 9 full-time positions that are vacant. So between those 9 positions and the churn of people leaving and no one in their spot for a couple months, that's what we're projecting for. Park and Rec expense, going back to Park and Rec, again, they're kind of mirroring on the revenue side, where the expenses are happening. Per mansion, as I stated, is 80,000 unfavorable, because that wasn't budgeted at all. Seed and fertilizer costs are about $40,000 over what we thought they were gonna be for the budget, just due to supply, I guess, for both, for all of our fields, not just the golfers. And then the result of increased play and maintenance of equipment is about $40,000. So we're unfavorable, an additional 100 range. We got a little bit worse. The Burr Mansion expenses, just to give you a feel, we thought were like -64, so now we're getting numbers from them. That's the negative 75. So that's where the 15,000 numbers came from.
I'm sorry, did you talk about MCC?
No, not yet. We're still on Park and Rec, right?
Okay.
But guys, Park and Rec.
Oh, sorry, I didn't, yeah.
So it's fertilizer, it's not because they're buying more, it's just the price change.
Correct.
Okay, great. And I just want to go back to the vacancies and churn.
Mhm.
So the $250,000, because there's positions staying open longer.
Well, the 250, so we've filled some and people have left. So as of the end of December, there was a whole different vacancy report out there. So now that we've filled some, this is where we are as of now. We know that there's 9 vacancies and basically the churn between, every position has a different churn, right? Because it depends on who left,
Yeah.
what dollar amount they left at, who's coming in. So that's the net result of all of it.
How many positions are still open?
9.
Just none.
Mhm.
What are the positions?
The DPW finance position's been open all year. There's 1 firefighter, 1 police officer, there's 2 DPW laborers. There's 1 building inspector, 1 purchasing buyer, there's 1 conservation crew chief, and 1 IT help desk.
Okay. What's being done about the DPW finance person? Why? Find somebody. Searching for a year, just not able to find somebody?
So we have applications and, the thing that was holding us up was the space in the finance department. Decided to talk to the other day, putting temporary space in there. We're gonna, as part of the renovation of town hall, there will be some renovations in the finance department. They're kind of built up, setting up to maximizing the space that we have. It's probably 2 months or so. So, talk to Bill about station so that we can this person. All the applications are expect to make a decision
So during the last year, your departments had to take on that role, all the work that person did beforehand?
I wouldn't say it was just our department. I think there's been, it's been spread out between and affected departments because of, you know, the way I envision this position is, it's not just going to be, it's going to be heavily capital intensive. Obviously, there are capital needs in every department. And so I think it's been, you know, responsibilities have been borne by different people, all departments. So but it's been the way we've been operating for a long time. It's not like it was a change. It's the way.
How much is that position?
Budgeted 75. There was never anyone in that position, so.
No, I know, but it's savings, so it's 75 plus another 30, so it's about $100,000 savings. Benefits, also that, correct?
Yeah, you're not gonna see the 30 in general. You see that in the return service fund, benefit.
But also the payments into the pension for the
That's still
50,
the,
whatever it's called.
the 401A contribution, yes, for one
Yeah.
person,
How much is that?
depends on what they contribute. I think it's 45%. Is the town match. Moving on to ECC, there's the 400 that we kind of talked about in Q2, attributable to the delayed opening of the Westport folks coming on board. And lastly, other went up significantly, like $700,000. Basically, there was a couple, and actually, Courtney touched on a lot of it, was the mild winter and utilities. That was about 400 to 500 of that. Because as of December, we didn't know, so we didn't forecast, really any savings on that piece of it. So that was, a lot of it. Other favorability that we're seeing right now is heart and hypertension. You know, we're self-insured. There's 150 that we're projecting savings on that.
How much?
150,000.
Okay.
And the assessor is saying that he thinks he's gonna be saving about $70,000 on appeals for his, legal fees for, those that are going through the court process. So really, it's the mild winter and utilities. He's reaching out to the DPW, director. He put some LED upgrades into the renovations at the town garage and Independence Hall. They've installed more efficient boiler upgrades, which use subsequently less electricity. And the warmer weather, you know, facilitated less natural gas usage, and on the electric side, less fan motor usage, and the DPW fire department and PD garages. And then as Courtney, kind of touched on again, that the rates were, I think they were lower than what was budgeted in fiscal 2023, and they were certainly lower from July through December because the UI rates actually increased in January. So between all of those kind of things, that's really driving that other ability of the 700 swing from Q2.
What about snowplow? Didn't have a lot.
Yep, that's in there. That's in the mild winter number. Yep. Yeah, and if you look at the DPW piece, there are like a lot of the savings are in their 503, just to give you a sense. But in the overtime snow removal is like 250 of it. So that was big. We had projected, just to give you a sense, of 70 back in December. We just didn't know. But really, it's the electricity is driving.
I have a question. So this 7 million variance, how much? So we didn't budget any contribution to surplus last year. Correct? So how much has to be paid into surplus to hold funds?
I think we were saying 675.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
For this year,
This year.
yes, for this year.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's like 675 this year and then 1.6,
Yeah.
1.2, 1.3.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So 675 and what? Yeah, why is that low? Is there something else? What is surplus?
Well, we had the unplanned benefit last year, kind of took the number up. So
Yeah,
We
we're
have a higher starting point.
True, we have a higher starting point. And then any savings we see here, actually, like this 2 million in savings on expense side is part of the equation. That reduces kind of the denominator.
Yeah, so it seems small, or 675.
So I have one question, just in terms of process procedure. I know last year we did have a number that stayed and went into the general fund, which raised our coverage from, I think it was 11.33 to 11.75. And that was not expected, but I think you were moving things right up at the last moment.
Well-
And I think, yeah, with the auditor and
It was
stuff.
the leases that attributed to over 500,000 of that. So we're working with him now on A, how he got the number, and B, what's that number gonna be? So we do have some new leases coming in this year.
Okay.
So that's gonna impact, I'm not sure,
Are
I'm kind of assuming it's still gonna be favorable, but I don't have that dollar amount.
When will you have that dollar? I guess my question is rooted in whether you're gonna be put in that tough spot of having to do everything in the 11th hour, and maybe having something fall through on the 10th.
Yeah, no, we're hoping, so we have his file, we have his spreadsheet, so to speak, as to how he kind of, he listed every lease and useful life of the lease and fair market value of the lease. So now it should just be, I'm working with the internal auditor, to update it for any current stuff.
Okay.
So the bulk of the work should be done. It's a couple new leases came in, a couple might have fallen off. So that should be the extent of having to maintain that spreadsheet and then knowing what that number is.
Yeah, and without giving a date certain, we come to you with a proposal of what to do with that. We'll feel confident that.
Yeah, we had that audit committee meeting, and that was, not, have our financials month late, A, B, still not know what final numbers are 3 days before. So there were a variety of things that contributed to that one, which was the least thing, so. That's definitely an area that's worked on this year, and Joe admitted to, he gave a bunch of things that perspective he needs. So, all right, so roughly 675. Great, any questions?
Yeah, so, I see this number go up the first quarter from 2.4 to a month. Here's 5.3. So are we gonna start doing what we told the Board of Ed, that we should start spending this surplus during the year on things? Because clearly we get $5 million to be there. I mean, not the whole thing, but probably at least 2.5. I mean, just like on the Board of Ed side. I mean, I think we should have a consistent policy that applies to both.
The town has a proposal. I mean, typically we get the town's proposal later, but if you have a proposal, of something here rather, because listen, I don't think the money's gonna go into fund balance, right? So we've always done something. We put it aside for Penfield, we put it aside for remediation. That's a big item. So, if there's a proposal to do that, then it can come before the board. And if there's a feeling that nobody's comfortable voting on something because we're not sure, then we wait.
Yeah, and then that'll happen again. We'll come to you guys with a proposal, and it probably, any different in nature than it's been in the past, where we're looking at capital projects, long-term things, expenses. So that'll be the basis for it. But I think, to your point, I think it's too early to have.
Okay. Explain me why you predict one foot level down. But you're no hurricanes coming. Why you're talking about mountains? As Charles said earlier, in order to get whatever we want done soon, waiting till, audited financials come out.
I didn't say we weren't talking about it.
December.
I didn't say we weren't talking about it,
Yeah. No, but I'm looking at the board of ed, and they're spending just as, approving things tonight. Yeah,
One
they're
thing I
spending
just
that surplus.
point out on the board of ed is, as we all know, they need to do a bunch of stuff during the summer, right? So if they're gonna do maintenance projects, I think they have that factor where they're, they probably do have to make decisions on a different timeline than the town. So the town has, I think, a little more flexibility there, assuming that's what they're doing. I mean, that's what I heard from the board of ed so far, not the Chromebook thing, but the security upgrades, major maintenance projects, we hear this from them all the time, that they have a finite window, and they have to go out, they have to secure contracts, put things out to bid, whatever they have to do, so they, so it may be a little bit different for them. But, I don't know, from everything we've heard on the town side, we know we have, I say fill pile loosely, but what's the one we haven't,
WPCA.
what's that site? The Nike site. So we have all that, which is a big unknown. And, have our sewers, right? So there'll be, and all those things are currently in process. So I feel like the timeline's a little different, but I'm taking it.
Yeah, well, and let's not lose sight of the fact that we had a round numbers, I forget exactly what it was, but roughly $6 million set aside for remediation.
Yeah.
That we, as a board, decided to put specifically towards Penfield, that now leaves about $6 million
Less.
of remediate, less coverage on the remediation side. And so, to your point, we're not 3 months away, we're 5 weeks away from the end of the year. I would think that, this is as of March 31st, but it's almost the end of May. And I would imagine that we have a pretty good sense of what the number is, but I think we do have big projects and things that we.
Yeah.
And what the conversation with the board of ed and what typically, what comes up here. How do they use that on their, on certain things in their operating budget? Typically ours, we can't really envision a scenario. Maybe there are a few things on the capital outlay that we might use it for, but, would come off the capital plan or something else related to capital. And so I started discussions, but we haven't finalized it.
Don't forget, I just want to add one thing. You can't spend additional revenue. So in order for us, so we'd be looking at less than $1 million that we knew about on the expense side. We need to go through 3 boards to be able to spend the bulk of this revenue. It's $5 million on the revenue side is the surplus. So we can't spend that. We can't go over our authorized appropriation on the expense side until we get approval from all 3 boards. So I can't spend 5 million of that 7 right now. So yes, we can think about it. We can come up with proposals, but until that's done, I can't spend that.
But if we wanted to spend $3 million,
I can't.
hold on.
Just can't do it. I can't. I need to.
Chillax a little bit. If we, wanted to spend it on something, we could take it all 3 bodies. Move the money.
It's not that easy to. You know that.
Well, no, it's what happens every single month on an appropriation. It goes through 3 bodies.
Every month.
No, almost every single month. I mean, the last couple of months, how much have we spent in sewer appropriation? I mean, we do this all the time, 3 bodies every month. Where something needs.
Funding.
For capital projects.
For capital projects.
Yeah.
But if we wanted to move this, what's the difference in the process? Does the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance?
Something we wanted to do. And the town needed to access these funds to do it, then I'm sure they would put it. Right, I mean, I think, and not to say what the town's gonna propose here, but if this is going to be a scenario where we're gonna put this aside to pay for the
Yeah.
bill pile of the Nike section,
Mhm.
that's not money that's gonna be spent, tomorrow. So that, I think, is perfectly fine to, wait and transfer it when we know. But if there's a situation, like I'm assuming the Board of Ed has, where they need to do maintenance projects when kids aren't at school, if we had a time-sensitive project that you wanted to put forward, and this was the source of funds, then I assume you would bring it to us. And I don't know if you've got.
If there were something urgent.
Right.
Yeah, I don't, did you have something urgent in mind? I guess maybe.
No, I know, I'm just wondering, since we just had this conversation with the Board of Ed, why doesn't the same thing apply to town? Why doesn't this body talk about it? Because this is a whole new world now we're going down. This has just never been done here. So if you're gonna make appropriations and like, we know something happens, and Caitlin tells us something happened, and we're gonna be saving $2 million this year. September, we bring it through the town body.
I mean, I don't know if it's a new world or not. For all I know, next year, the Board of Ed could be $1 million in hole. Like this year, they happen to have,
Oh,
that's right. Right?
I learned a lot tonight.
Right.
I learned a lot tonight.
So, so this year they happen to have a surplus. If they want to use it on things that are time sensitive, it's just, I see it as a different equation. I mean, I think if the town had the need, then they could bring it before us. They have, you know, I looked at, you know, I did forward to the board, the maintenance projects that were requested. You know, they do have this ongoing list. I mean, I get it, you know, I understand the concern, does feel a little, you know, funny.
We
But
have,
I think ultimately the decision is gonna be, are they spending that money on things that are, you know, that we don't support? I mean, not that we get a vote on it, but that's the question, right? So we've been promised some additional updates. And we'll get them.
we have capital projects out there, we could, at any given moment, if we wanted to take $3 million and say, hey, we're gonna pay cash for this instead of borrow money. We can do that. If we want to take a, you know, look at it in a little more nuanced way and more thoughtful about how we use it. That's what we know.
And Jim, just to be clear, like, I'm not advocating that I think the Board of Ed should be working overtime to spend every dollar surplus they have. My point was that.
You don't have to tell me that. I know they are.
No,
It's a fair they are.
Now, my point was that spending, if you have surplus and they're gonna plan and discuss it and vote on it and do it in a thoughtful way, it's better than waiting until the end of the year, and trying to spend that much money each year. I mean, it seems to me that, you know, typically they give some amount of money back to the town, but we all know what happens, too. And I don't think that's a great thing. So I think if it's, you know, if they know about a surplus earlier and they want to take several months to evaluate their security systems, bring in the police, bring in a consultant, figure out what's needed, do that thoughtfully so that the project can get done during the summer. I'd rather do that than say, okay, it's June, we've got a bunch of extra money, let's spend it on stuff. And that was my thing.
Couple more questions. Yeah. So Caitlin, what do you think were the biggest surprises for you this
Well, I shouldn't say surprise, but the mild winter and the snow. I mean, you just don't know in February what's gonna happen.
Whether that's going to deteriorate? or-
Especially the electricity too, because they're always a month in arrears. So at that point, for that 6-month period, I probably only had 5 bills, so
Okay. So
it was hard. I mean, that's,
do you think we're going to, I mean, you guys been setting all this stuff around. Have we booked for our electricity costs contract? The upcoming fiscal year 24.
you asking about 24 again?
Yeah.
No, we're in 23.
Yeah, that's.
To be clear, what
That'll get you here. Here enough, I gotta ask my stuff now.
The current contract ends in, the end of this year,
Calendar year?
and, yep, and we entered into, another contract that takes out to 25.
Does that mean we're not going to capture the savings?
So there are savings from,
Electric.
for next year, for 24.
UI just announced they're cutting
Right.
their
Right,
costs.
so we're locked in to pricing through end of calendar 25.
We're locked in, yep, yep. I don't, when you say savings, I don't know what their rate is and how that relates to what's in their contract.
I don't know details. I've simply heard significant decreases. And so I thought for that, but we shouldn't expect that to benefit the town because we are contractually
Right,
obligated.
that's what, yep.
So I guess when you do that, you win some, you lose some, right?
Or you look for a place to break the contract.
What's that?
Or if you're an attorney, you look for a way to break the contract, and maybe there's a fee to do that, but maybe it's worthwhile. And then risks over the next 6 weeks that you see. I know you normally, and I'm not saying you're not doing it, I know you normally, things you know about. Normally tell us about what you're seeing on the other side. But do you see any, would be your biggest concern?
Any significant
Why,
risk?
why we're not gonna hit 7,028,000?
No, I think we're conservative on the investment income. To Lori's point, I think that could be slightly higher. Conveyance could be
That's a wild card.
a little bit worse than 300. Pretty comfortable building permits being at least on, I mean, it's only 100. Park and rec is weather dependent, right? If it rains for the next 6 weeks, golf's gonna be,
Yeah.
it is what it is. People aren't gonna be going to the beach. There's no daily parking.
Golf start money gets a lot worse.
Yeah, I was gonna mention, and animal control, now that we have a ton of animals here, and we're, I don't know if you guys have read the patch.
Yes.
I reached out to Keith Broderick and, he had subsequently reached out to Paul Miller. They're gonna see probably about $20,000 on these bids, through set at least mid-July for the housing, the vet bills, the part-time costs, the food.
Is any of that
I know,
recoverable?
that's what I asked him too, I'm like, can we lean, can we as a recourse, he wasn't sure.
That's for like dogs or cats that are down that we take in.
That read that out,
Forty animals.
was the article the patch?
Yeah, there's one resident that had, what, 40, 50?
40 or 50 very, ag animals in very bad condition.
And the judge says she can have no animal.
Before, or she just,
So we've taken them in, I believe, there's been surrounding towns that have helped us as well. So that was one thing that actually just came out the past couple of days. Vacancies, we're pretty comfortable with. Again, Park and Rec, just on the weather side. But the other savings, I think they're real, especially with the mild winter and the utilities, so. No.
that's good.
All right, I just have one last question, and you made reference before when you were talking about the tax revenue about, you just sent out the intent to lien, saying, that we're doing that, says
That's every year.
Yeah.
We do it every
Yeah.
year, okay. So I
They
know
don't do tax sales or tax liens, those
Because
are
we
different.
send it out and then people pay, and then we don't need to go to taxes, okay.
Yes.
All right.
So can't say they didn't know they were gonna get any.
Your golf cart revenue?
Yeah.
It's flat.
Yeah, I flat, and how was the revenue on the golf cart fees? Was that flat, or was that increased?
The fees, I think the golf commission made a mistake. They did not increase the fees for the current season.
Okay.
The golf commission had a history of raising cart rates periodically, but not each and every year. But historically, the golf commission has always taken the opportunity to increase golf cart fees when a new fleet of golf carts arrives. So people feel good about riding in a new shiny cart, and they have a new fleet this year at the same rate as last year. That, in my opinion, was a mistake by the golf commission.
And I think COVID skewed that number, because I think originally you only had one person in the cart and stuff, so I think we're kind of
That's a fair.
starting over from that point, and they had different fee structure due to that. So that was probably the 2 years, so you can't really look at history kind of, and kind of look at that.
I think the golf pro and the management of the course, they're doing a great job. They're maximizing rounds and they've extended hours for the golf cart usage. There was a time in the past when you could only rent a cart up until a certain hour and then you wouldn't. But the golf pro, to his credit, recognized that if he paid an individual an hourly rate, $15, whatever he's paying, to stay an extra couple of hours, he can generate $250 in revenue. It was worth it. So he's doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I do think that the issue that we're seeing on that line item is rate related, not utilization.
Can I just ask one more question? Why is it says that the golf bike park are going down in sales?
Yeah, that I don't know.
Because we're issuing more season passes. Then when I look at the season pass one, it says respect.
I think that's a mix between resident and non-resident too, so I think Anthony analyzes that piece, but I think there's less non-residents playing.
Well, that's definitely true. I mean, I did notice that when I looked at the golf reports, and I hate to get into too much history, but there was an analysis done a number of years ago that the ideal number of rounds at the golf course is between 40 and 45,000. So you want to maximize revenues based on those number of rounds, because anything less than 40, and you struggle to break even. Anything more than 45, and then the wear and tear on the golf course gets so much that the maintenance exceeds the incremental revenue. So that's the sweet spot. So then how do you maximize revenue with that kind of mix and keep the rates right for residents? And the golf commission should be trying to get a 2/3 resident, 1/3 non-resident mix. And if you do that, you're going to maximize it. Last year, the rates or the rounds were not 40 to 45,000, but 50,000. Okay, good problem to have. That probably means you can raise rates a little bit and get away with it. But the mix of rounds was 3/4 residents and 1/4 non-resident. So they did generate a surplus, but not as much of a surplus as they could have. They drill down a little bit more on that, and you'll find is that the previous tee time system that the golf commission was using, or golf course was using, allowed residents to book tee times 4 hours before non-residents. From 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. was resident-only window. For non-residents could tap in as early as 9 a.m. With the current system, non-residents have to wait a full day. So it's not a 4-hour head start for residents, it's a 24-hour head start for residents. And that means by the time a non-resident wants to play, the tee sheet's full most times. So it's a good problem. It's a good situation for residents, but it's not a great situation for the town because the revenues are being negative.
Maybe you should just present the budget.
We're gonna defer to Mr. Curley.
Next. Great. Are we ready to move on? Okay. Great, thank you, Kate. Great, so we're gonna move on to item 6. You hear an update on Enfield Pavilion. We have Mr. Tom Bremer.
Good evening, everyone.
Welcome, and Steve and
Everybody, it's a question if we need more money, the town always could use more money between now.
You can start it, right?
all right, so
And we got,
okay, so before talking to Tom, we have, so that the materials related to this item are on page 126 of the postal packet.
yeah, and I think, I really wanted you to get a copy of the, I'm sorry, get a copy of the, Enfield project schedule. Because really, that's become our Bible. This is what we're living by. And so I'm assuming that as we go through things, once it really begins, the schedule will change and all that kind of stuff. And my thought is, as you may or may not know, I'm also providing updates to the Board of Selectmen. So to the extent this starts changing, I will send it to you as well, so you'll be able to see it change as well. And whatever questions rise as a result, that's fine. I'll be able to answer. Very briefly, where are we today? Where we are today is we've entered into contracts with all the major players, the construction manager, the architects, the whole army is out there and they're all working. What are we doing since the approval happened is basically we've entered into contracts. We had all the contracts approved by the Board of Selectmen. And right now, what is happening is the architect, the structural engineers, they are doing the actual work to put the plans together. What we expect to have, let's see, it's the end of May, before the end of June, hopefully, I'm expecting to have basically a full design plan outlined, in architectural plans. And that becomes the basis of bids that will be handled by the construction manager and our remediation LEP. We're really using the summer to get all the bids together and be able to put the bids out, get the bids in, award all the contracts, all the different subcontractors, because the drop dead day for us is the day after Labor Day. I'm telling everybody that the fences got to go up, and I want to start remediating and start construction right after Labor Day. To give you a quick snapshot of what we expect, I'm expecting certainly in September, we have to take down all the decks. We have to take down all the stairs. We have to take down all the, what I would call the outside infrastructure, above ground. All of that has to be removed. At the same time, we have to support the roofs, so we'll be constructing things to support those roofs, so that we can begin cleaning out all the stuff underneath the buildings that are all well aware of what needs to be done. So that's the plan as I see it today. We're on schedule, although it's very early. We're on schedule. We're having meetings every 2 weeks. Just met with the architects just the other day to start going over the plans of, okay, what are the decks gonna look like that we have to rebuild and all that kind of stuff. Because we have to get some artist renderings going so that everybody can be comfortable with what we finally produce at the end of the day. That's a little bit backwards, but it's something that needs to be done as well. One thing I would call out to you is in July, in the center of this, I'm not sure if the yellow highlighting came through, but it's a FEMA package submission for record. And what my plan is once I have the design drawings all done, and this is what we're gonna do, and this is what we want to build, my thought is to I'll be approaching FEMA before that, but at that time, I want to send a package to FEMA because I want someone on FEMA to say, what you're gonna build is okay by us. I've had it said, I've gone over this conceptually, they've approved everything, but I would feel better if, and this is just because of the history of this building, I'd feel much better if this is what we're gonna build, are you sure it's okay? Because I really want them to say it's okay. And part of that is not only what we want to build, but there's the other piece. And I know this is more financing, financing. I am too. It's the responsibility of this project. And in my mind, I've only got two numbers I worry about. The first number is obviously the budget number. The second number I worry about is the 50-50 rule. And so what I want to get from them as well, hopefully, is for them to say, again, conceptually, I've gone over what I think applies under the 50-50 rule. And the answer I have always gotten back is, yeah, that sounds good, that sounds good, that sounds good. What I really want to do is, as part of that process that I'm submitting for FEMA, I'm going to say, okay, here are the costs that we'll have all the bids in. Here are the costs that we are assessing the 50-50 rule, and it will be under the 50-50. And I want to make sure that they're very comfortable with how I line up those costs, and they're comfortable with how we're going to proceed. And so really, those are the things I'm trying to get done before we put a show on. So that's it. That's where we are.
Mr. Matola?
So I appreciate what you just said about getting okay for FEMA. FEMA historically was our glacier pays. So what happens if you send this to the real hearing?
That's what happened last time.
Kind of what happened if I see with construction still. I mean, that's
Well,
I know you're in the public.
yeah, I mean, I'd like to say that I'll just call them every day until they respond, but, I think as a practical matter, I've had a number of conversations with them in the past, and they say they will do that. In my mind, the worst case scenario is that's exactly what happens, and I don't really have to sign up for them. I really believe that if I'm put in that position, what we need to do then is, I'm still gonna have to take everything down, because I still have to I still have to remove a lot of the, different things. I will have my LEP start remediating the parking lots, which have nothing to do with the building, but that's part of this overall, program. And there are some spots on the standard stuff, so I'm gonna start remediating and just lean on them as hard as I can to get them to sign off.
How much time does that leave you though? So to John's point.
If I can
How
get,
much time, based on this schedule, when do you, the actual construction of the building that's reliant on them signing off? So what, is that 6 months? What is that?
I think, I guess I look at it like this, I'm gonna be going to FEMA in July. And what I'd like to do is get them to respond before September 4th.
Right, but.
All right, so if that doesn't happen,
I mean, how long does the remediation take? The things that have to happen anyway, like suppose they come back and say, we don't like the building like this, you have to do something.
I'm gonna guess, I mean, I'd have a better,
But we have a timeline. When does the construction on this timeline begin? Or does it,
construction of what?
build, whatever
Specific.
FEMA has to. complete.
It's hard to say, I would say probably 2 or 3 months,
You could do 2 or 3 months of work without
without really
touching
any
that
fee.
building.
Yeah. I have to take everything down, I have to start remediating, so that's digging under stuff, has nothing to do with
So
FEMA.
is the town's intent to proceed without FEMA approval if we don't have it in time?
That's not gonna happen.
Don't do it.
No, I can't, if they say we'll get back to you, we'll get back to you, and they never do. Very hard to start.
Yeah, like, let's say it takes 6 months. I mean, that's.
Then it's 6 months, I will lose 6 months, you're right, I can't just go, said it once, I've said it 1,000 times, we're not going ahead unless we've got it.
Okay.
So, Mr. Bremer.
Yeah.
Just looking at the chart here, I think what I heard you say was that you will have the bids in, so you'll have real numbers to share with FEMA and this stuff, but looking at this hand chart, you're going to FEMA in July, but the bidding doesn't close until what it looks like mid-August. So how does that work?
Well, what we're gonna do is, hopefully we'll have some numbers, but the real number that we're focused on the 50/50 is the cost to get rid of those grade beams. But as I've said to them in the past, the cost that we're concerned about at 50/50 is cutting out the grade beams, removing the grade beams, and then rebuilding new grade beams at a different elevation.
Yeah.
That's it.
So is that bid being
That's bid,
accelerated? Is
yes,
there a
that-
different timeline
that-
for the bids?
yes, yes,
So that bid is due earlier than August 15th.
yes. And I'm also leaning on the construction manager because we're not sure as we sit here today, if I have all the people that have been working on this, they're not sure as this is exactly which bids are gonna be put out, which ones the construction manager, his own people will do. We've had a number of discussions where I've said, look, if the bids, you're waiting for these bids on the concrete portion, and let's say they're double what we put. Can you do this? Can you do this in-house? Do you have the expertise? And they do. So they don't want to commit to doing it until they see what the bids are, because they want to make 22, so that kind of thing. So I have to, so we're going down that path as well. So I'm confident we'll have good numbers when I go down from some source.
Does it make sense to, if everything up until the end of July stays the same, so your bids are due between, sometime in July and August 15th. does it make sense to not plan to close the building on September, after Labor Day, and maybe you start October 1st? I mean.
We have to see how it goes.
I'm thinking of two competing things there, right? Well, three, right? Obviously, we've got this FEMA thing that I applaud and agree that put something in front of them and get them to bless it before we move forward. But recognizing that FEMA's not going to move fast, we can either get it to the infrastructure sooner, which we're limited by the bidding schedule, so that may not be an option, or we delay when we start, which would be a benefit to the residents if the beach was actually open through the end of September, which is still kind of beach season. So that's not necessarily a problem, but I also recognize that construction into and through the winter is not, so I know you want to get started.
The later you start, the later you end.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, but I think given the constraints on this FEMA schedule, and the bidding and making sure that's coordinated, I would think putting the fences up September 5th versus October 1st. I think,
It's very ambitious.
it is ambitious, but my experience has taught me construction that if you say, well, maybe we'll do it in October, November, all of a sudden it's November, December. So my attitude is I push like crazy and I see what happens. If it's not doable, it's not doable, but I'd rather push the team to be as early as we can than to lighten up.
and I respect every different, I understand the logic and I get it, and I tend to agree with the exception of the fact that if those construction fences go up on October 1st, and it gives those 3 weeks of September to the residents who might show up to go to the beach and they can't because construction started, versus.
So we're not closing the whole beach, we're not closing the whole beach. The construction fence is only going around the building and the parking lot, so, but you're absolutely right. Like I said, the later I start, the later I finish.
Can I just, on this FEMA thing though, so. And I read the history on this so many times, I don't have it all committed to memory, but so our construction manager, architect, whatever, they're putting together these specifications. We're gonna ask FEMA to bless it. It's not gonna happen, concurrently, it's gonna go out to bid. Now, once it goes out to bid, what's the risk that that something changes from there? Because, I mean, this is what happened last time, right? There was changes to the original design after it was submitted to FEMA, and that's what blew everything up, right?
That's part of the reason, yes.
It's part of the reason.
Absolutely.
So I guess in terms of the risk here, let's just say it takes FEMA 3 months, 6 months, however long it takes them to sign off on the original specifications that we send them. If something changes, then that adds another layer. So how is that gonna work?
Well, the issue that FEMA is, the issue that I've dealt with FEMA is, the town, when it redid Penfield last, within a month or two of the beginning of the construction, they went in an entirely different direction. They just changed everything. They didn't change the window, they changed the whole direction of it. What FEMA said to me is, look, we'll approve your drawings, and you have to guarantee that what you send us, you're actually gonna build, because we're gonna wanna see the blueprints, the as-built drawings at the end. Make sure that what you said you're gonna build, we're building. So to the extent we're gonna make, in my mind, any major change, oh my God, we gotta stop everything. And so my attitude, and this has been communicated to the team on a number of occasions, is once we start, we're not making any changes. There are always going to be extras. There's always going to be somebody who didn't, find this, that, or the other. But if this is the way we're going, we're not going to make any major changes going forward.
Okay.
And if we do, then it's on us.
So let me ask another question then, because we want to get started, and let's say you want to guns blazing September 1st, want to start on the remediation. FEMA's still looking at things. we start doing the remediation, FEMA takes 6 months to get back to us, whatever. So the construction site is open there for longer than anticipated. Where do we stand on insurance?
Well, we're not gonna start anything without insurance.
Oh, do we have insurance yet?
I have not seen the actual signed thing, but I've been told that we have.
We have it?
But I'm hesitating because I haven't seen the document. And when I see the document, then I'll be more comfortable. But we're not gonna start anything unless we have insurance. Just not
Okay.
gonna do it. We're just not.
And who's told us to start, who's?
Rob,
Okay, and I forgot his,
Assured Partners, it's Rob, I don't know his last name, but it's.
the one that was here.
Yeah. Yes,
Okay, so he found somebody to underwrite this.
that's exactly.
And do we know the cost versus what was in?
I am told just generally what the cost is, but like I said, I haven't seen it in the document, so I'll believe when I see it. It's around 200 grand.
And what was it in the budget
I think we budgeted closer to 500.
for the insurance?
Because that was his first number that we threw out, was 500 grand. And I also have another broker working on it as well, so.
I guess, so we have to understand what that covers, right?
Is it possible to make this a monthly update, like get it in June? I know we're gonna take July and August off, and then.
Well, June's 2 weeks from now, so
Okay.
we have a special meeting at some point during the summer.
I mean, anything major that happens,
Yeah.
I don't have a problem letting you know, positive or negative.
Then you're going before the board of selectmen.
And I go before the board of selectmen.
Mr. Walsh.
I would be my recommendation that we work as soon as possible. Like, I don't care what's leaving that, I mean, seriously, I mean, I've been involved in 3, for my employer, 3 commercial jobs, a couple of them complicated. One of them is coming time. Perhaps getting reports. There are still supply chain issues that are out there, or waiting forever on stuff, you're gonna hit that. Well, what scares me the most is the remediation. You don't know where it goes. You've done yeoman's work, work at Godspeed, get all those 40 properties taken care of, but all it takes is one little snag, something's not right, more testing, and next thing you know, there goes a month. So I would get it started, my recommendation, plan to get this month, September, when most people are back in schools. The lifeguards don't work after that, right? Labor Day?
It's cool.
So, my recommendation. I had a question about, you're talking about the decking and stuff. I was thinking about that. Let me show you a picture. The, this part, is that coming down?
No,
No, that stays up. So you'll just deal with the remediation under there, like just digging up the,
say this, let's talk about the roof.
I don't know what you call it.
Yeah.
The portico, I don't know what
Yeah.
you call it.
The roof that
Cover
extends over the
top,
deck.
yeah.
Yeah, that's staying right where it is.
Okay. Remediation that has to be done under the building, are you tearing up all the floors and going straight down?
No, we're coming in from the side.
From the sides, okay,
We're not touching the building.
yeah. And you're sucking it out, or what are you doing? Sand is,
Some of it will be vacuumed out, some of it will be dug out.
very short people.
I've had that same charge. Tiny little troubles.
Of my word.
No, but part of it is, you have to understand, when you take out all the decking, it opens up a lot of space. So you can come in from the sides,
Sure.
the small,
Okay.
but you're right, I mean, that's part of the reason it's so high cost, because it can be very hard. And digging stuff out is hard,
I mean,
it's very hard, but digging the stuff out, that's the easy part, it's cutting the big concrete
Yeah.
grade beams and dropping them a couple of feet and forming them.
Mm-hmm.
And while you're, in this kind of situation, that's a little tricky. Assuming there's no water under the building, when the tide comes in, that's a whole other issue.
And the goal here is to have.
Oh, we'll be one.
I'm sorry?
Goal is that at July 4th of next 24.
The goal is, well, when am I starting?
First.
Well, I'm saying start, I mean, you say you want to start. Look at your project list that goes slightly into July. I presume that's July 4th.
Okay?
Okay, maybe it's July.
No,
What I'm being told is 12 to 15 months.
that's July 25.
So,
24.
Well, look at the
24?
mediation and construction.
Next summer.
24.
Following summer.
Being the same thing.
We're starting in September. We're gonna be done the following summer.
9 months.
Yes.
I didn't say 9.
Well,
This, your schedule shows July.
Well, it doesn't end there, it just keeps going.
I was gonna say,
Did you see there's no little end to it.
I will.
We'll never make it in 9 months.
18 months would be July 25.
They said 12 to 15.
March
The
20.
construction manager is sticking to 12 to 15. I'm gonna push him to do 12. So if we start in September, it'll be in September.
You're gonna lose it for next summer.
So next summer, that's it.
And I just want to clarify, I agree that starting sooner is better, but what I was hearing was that we may have some front end delays with this FEMA piece.
Yeah.
That it might make sense to just, like, if it doesn't make sense to me to start 3 weeks earlier and then we're 3 weeks into the project and then have to wait, or 2 or 3 months into the project and have to wait. But that's, I do have some related questions though. Sure. In terms of the bidding process. This is a project that's not really a good candidate for value engineering. So if the budget, if the bids come in above expectations, without the ability to do much, if anything, on the value engineering side, is there an expectation that you'd have to come back to the board for more money? And if so, that's gonna be right in this timeline, which would then, again, make it logical to plan to start October 1st. I mean, your bids are due
And
in
it's about
August.
$7 million is promised.
I'm not saying you won't say yes, but it's gotta go through the process. One look. There's the 3 weeks that I'm talking about. That's all.
You're pointing out things that I agree with. There are a number of things that could happen that would change this schedule, without a doubt. If all the bids come in way high, we have to deal with that, I mean, of course. As I stated when I first sat down, this schedule may change, you're absolutely right. But my thought is, I've got to start somewhere with the schedule, so this is the schedule. Unless something happens in my meetings, we're sticking to the schedule unless somebody's going to shoot.
Let me ask you a question.
Go ahead.
My question is about remediation. Remediation has to be done regardless.
That's
In order to do
correct,
the remediation, you gotta get rid of the decks.
absolutely.
So I don't know why you wouldn't just, regardless, and I agree with not putting a new building in, but all the remediation has to happen no matter what.
Yes, but the remediation can't happen by itself.
Okay.
I can't dig out everything and then say, okay, I'll be back in 3 months and when FEMA says, okay, I can start construction. They're so intertwined.
Okay.
I can't get all the dirt out because now I've got nothing holding
One
building it.
construction.
Okay, so I can only do a portion of it, remediate, and then I gotta work on that portion, and then remediate another portion, I work on construction. That's the problem, everything is interrelated.
Okay.
Otherwise, figure it out now.
Well, hopefully we won't have to worry about the bids because Bismarck expressed great confidence, as I recall, in their numbers.
We shall see.
Think,
Tom, one other question, just in terms of,
And I remind them of that all the time.
you talked about the different pieces and remediation's gotta happen, right? But like, you've broken the budget into, I think it was 3 parts. Is that, just in terms of timing and process, order of events, the grade of the beach is gonna be lowered at some point. Does that happen after construction? Is that like the last step?
No, that's early in the situation. Why is it early in the situation?
Yeah.
Because what I was referring to earlier, we want to get access under the building.
Yeah.
So I want to get rid of some of that, I want to lower the elevation because that enables me to get under the building even that much easier.
Does that expose the project to, storm surge? Does that put the construction at a greater risk?
No,
Because I get it. We had the whole discussion and I loved, the younger gentleman from engineering, he put the big map up and showed all the 17 points. where- That was fantastic. Really illustrated the point well. But I do imagine that it's not a 99 or 100-year flood that we're worried about. It's that 10-year flood that, like, we saw that it's a fairly regular occurrence for that winter storm surge to come up to levels that would go over that. Even if it's not going to make its way through the whole neighborhood, I would think that lowering that grade prior to the completion of the construction would put the construction more at risk.
all right, I'll answer it this way. The residents or you or me, as we sit here today, we're focused on the 10-year flood. At least I am as well. In the meetings, we decided that we have to also worry about the 50-year flood while they're doing this construction. It's gonna be open for a year, but they're gonna be doing this. So what happens? What do? We hear that there's a storm coming for 48 hours. So what do? And the short answer is, we run in there and let's say, there's a channel that's already been dug out. We're about to start doing construction and we're gonna cut. We got 48 hours, the storm's coming. So,
Sandbags or something?
no, we come in with clean fill it in. We just fill everything in. And will increase costs, of course, but a major storm coming, it's a major storm coming. My suspicion is that, with a 10 or 25-year flood, storm, we'll have to deal with that as well. We'll fill it in, we'll fill it in, that kind of. So not only is the water going to be coming in elsewhere than Penfield, I have to say, I'm not nearly as concerned as a number of the residents are about this lowering of the elevation and all that kind of stuff, because everything I've read, everything I've seen, kind of goes counter to what I've been told, which is, hey, it was always at 8 feet beforehand. And only when they built Penfield did they build this up. And so beforehand, it was always at 8 feet. And you're absolutely right. Every 10 years, whatever. Yes, there's water in the parking lot. Yes, water comes in by the houses and that sort of thing. One of the things that I did when the last storm in December came, and it was a pretty bad storm. Of course, I ran down to Penfield at midnight to see where the water was. But, on the peninsula, where all the houses are, there was water maybe 2 or 3 feet, just going right over the street. And I was there, I saw the video there. Water was going like crazy. Nothing came down to Penfield, nothing, zero. So I went to DPW and said, all right, let's say you, one of our top guys, he's been there for forever. So you've been here like 30 years. How often do you go down and have to clean Penfield parking lot? How often do you have to? He goes, that peninsula that I was talking about in December, he goes, we go down there. Every time we have a storm, we have to go there, clean up all the sand and stuff. How often do you in Penfield? He goes, once every 10 years. So that tells me there's not a lot of now. You could argue with that. Well, because it's been built up there. Well, but that can't be true because, as you saw, there's blue that's coming in from everywhere. So, is it possible that there'll be a little bit more water in the parking lot after we're down to 8 feet? Of course.
Yeah, I'm not.
But I'm not so worried.
Concerned about the construction side.
No, I am too, and I think they're ready for that, because they're more worried about a big storm than a little storm. And I figure if they got answers for everything in the big storm, we'll be all right with the little storm.
What's the status of the coastal engineering study?
Race Engineering has done, they finished one phase, none of the resiliency. The first thing we had to do before we went to the architects is because we're lowering the elevation, Race Engineering had to basically redesign some of their previous studies to take account of the lower elevation. So we needed to know if a storm comes, what kind of scour and what kind of forces will be on the new building at a lower elevation. That cost about $35,000. That was one of the contracts that we entered into, and it's already been completed. So all that information has already gone over to the architects.
This is
Now,
the same as the,
it's not part of the resiliency study, the $100,000.
Right.
But that, they've just completed that, I think, last week. So now what we're doing is we're sitting down, we've already sat down with them and said, okay, we want you to update the study that you've done in the past. And we wanna put together a resiliency package for Penfield, some resiliency package. My understanding is that, FECB, some members from the Fairfield Erosion Control Board, sent some other ideas they had that, and we've said, Grace, we want you to consider those as well. And come up with, I think the last time I looked, their study in 2017, they had 7 or 8 ideas that they thought we might be able to use to help with resiliency. So I'm gonna add maybe 1 or 2 others from the Fairfield Erosion Control Board. And I said to them, look, at the end of the day, we want you to come through all these different things and come up with a smaller number, but a number that you think, you Race think, might be acceptable to FEMA and DEEP. Really, it's DEEP and PA, but FEMA as well. And the plan is, when we get that study, which they are, as we speak, working on, when that study's completed, we have some things, then the plan is to go to DEEP and FEMA and everybody and say, what do you think of these? And see where it goes. So that's the plan, that's where we are.
questions?
Thank you. Thank you. And I guess I would.
I know October 1st,
Yeah, I don't know, I just, whether it's a, special meeting during the summer or a September meeting, I'd love to have Tom back on the agenda just so that we can update.
whatever you need. Happy to do.
And I imagine that the September meeting will be, a lot will have happened. Well,
I may be before you saying I need till October 1st. So be it. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Move to item 5, your update on capital projects. Jerry, is this you?
And you included in this, I'm not gonna go into detail how a lot of the projects, you can see, comments from each of the departments on where each of them stands. So maybe a couple of things and then I'll open it up to questions. So a lot of the, a lot of the holdup on some of these projects, especially the bigger projects, is federal government. I'll give you one example. The radio project, the police radio project for $7 million. If we,
Is this no,
this is not,
the regular one?
Yeah, right. That is on, that's in the 23.
Last page 4.
And so that one, you know, I think we were all sitting there, especially once we got the grant for half of it. Great. We're like, okay, so this is just a matter of, you know, getting the equipment and, which should be pretty simple and could be done quickly. I'm gonna find out that, you know, after we got approval for the grant, there was a whole, that was just to get through basically the appropriation process from the federal government, so they approved it. Then we had to go and apply to the program. The application of the program took quite a long time. We actually, yesterday, just got the money, just got that $3.5 million. So it took a long, long time to get through that process. And I think the the federal government has, since COVID, has opened up so many programs and there's so much money out there. Everything's taking a long time. Any of these things that involve federal people.
So we waiting to get the cash before we move forward? Is that-
They, I don't know that they were waiting for I don't know that they were waiting for the cash. Or where they stand in the process right now, but, I'll double check that. Saying that the service contract next board, selecting meeting, so, suspect they're waiting. So that was the kind of the main comment that I wanted to make about this, because you'll see that a lot of these, they've obviously all been approved. So a lot of work that needs to be done and a lot of remaining balances, and many cases they have to do with federal funding or federal approval, federal permits. So that's a lot of things. And I'll open it up to the questions.
Questions? Or maybe I'll just ask a general one, so, and I think your comments, I appreciate those comments on the fiscal 23 capital over $1 million. Look at fiscal 22 capital. Is there a way to tell here on some of these, and part of why we wanted to get ongoing updates on this is oftentimes we are all the time, we're approving these estimates that are, very preliminary nature, well before any bids have gone out. Is there a way to figure out here what the costs look like as compared to what bids came in at? And I suppose if the bids came in over what we had approved, you would be coming back to us, but how can we tell that? And is there, and maybe it's just something, and I don't expect you to go through each one of these, but is there a way that we can have that designation in a column or something going forward so that we could kind of tell, if we had a project that was approved, I mean, we just did the sewer one, right? It's $11 million. I know it's gonna be some time before that goes out to bid, but once things do, I think that would be really helpful to sort of understand what these costs look like. What the estimates look like as compared to what,
Yeah, I hear, I thought, the reason that we put in the expended and encumbered amount was because that reflects actual amounts versus if we put in what the accepted bid is, that could change. There could be change orders, there could, that's not the final number. And so that's why we put in what's actually spent.
so expended and encumbered. So let me just take one as an example here. Dog farm. Okay, so that's got a total cost of 3.7 million. And we've got expended and encumbered together of whatever it is, 3.3 million. Is that an indication that the bid came in at lower than the original estimated cost?
I wouldn't make that assumption. I think, yeah, I wouldn't want to say that generally, and whether that's the case on this particular one, and
Yeah. I mean, there are There's a lot, but there's really not that many. I mean, I'm wondering if there's an indication, because normally I think expended and encumbered combined would be, because we encumber, right, well, whatever's authorized to spend. So I'm used to thinking of those two as being, you know, the current estimate of cost, and then that column out to the right would be, you know, unless there's no encumbrance, like we've got, it's like the second one, Gould Manor, you know, I don't know what that is. We've got a cost of $1,395,000, nothing expended or encumbered. This is fiscal 22. Does that mean it's, like, what is that actually?
That's completed.
So completed, so the remainder is, why is there an amount remaining?
That's a good question. That'd be the calculation. Sorry, which
line are we on?
So I'm like,
Second one, yeah.
I'm just trying to understand how to read the schedule. But I think, you know, part of the hope for this is that we could sort of, you know, get an understanding of how the projects were doing, budget to actual versus what the amounts were authorized. And it's just really hard to tell. I appreciate the statuses on here. And some of them, when you read the statuses, it's evident that you know, you don't know what it's gonna be yet because it still hasn't gone out to bid, for example. But some of these, are well underway and you still can't tell. So I was initially thinking that I would, you know, look at that remaining column and that was an indication of whether we were over or under, but that doesn't seem to be the case on some of these.
On Gold Manor, that you're saying the 1.395 and remaining should be under expended.
Yeah, that was one that just didn't, I think, for
But
whatever.
it's committed exactly 1,395, you know what I mean? And that's, so what is
How much did you
the,
spend on the project?
there was some number expended and there's probably some remaining balance, but
Yeah.
Hopefully. But if it came in at 1.4 and we cover the 5,000 through your operating.
Yeah, if it's a small amount.
Yeah, you know.
yeah, and so maybe the remaining column is, in that case, that's just a calculation issue, but you know what I'm trying to get at, right? So maybe as we're, it would be good to have sort of a common definition in terms of what these columns really mean so we can understand, like, does remaining mean there's more work to be done, or is that an over/under?
Again, I don't know if we could
Yeah.
have it. I don't know if we could narrow it down to a common definition. I think what you might want to see is another spreadsheet with a list of the projects that shows what was approved and then what the bid accepted. bid
Yeah,
was.
and I think this would be good for the town as well. I mean, when you're putting together your, you know, capital plan, I think some of this starts to be helpful if you see trends over time, you know, how things are shaping out versus these original estimates and, you know, and why. I mean, since you haven't come back to us on any of these, I've got to assume that we're being conservative on those amounts we're approving.
Does the cost, where it says cost on any of these projects, is that what the combine is approved here? Or is that not necessarily the same number?
Yeah, the cost is what was approved.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, we, and Kayla and I talked about it before when we were doing the, going back and looking at compromise and issue. So we fall into the same category, and these, every one of them has a different story. You know, you could look at each one and there's a different reason why, they cover, you know, the expended and encumbered equals the full amount. Why it's a little bit less there. They all have their own story, their own background.
Yeah, I'm thinking this is your DPW accountant person or whatever.
Totally.
Because honestly,
Yeah.
it's hard for me to believe that, you know, Bill Hurley or somebody is like, yeah, like, it's just another, you know, who's tracking this at the project, you know, from a financial perspective. You know, it just, there's not that many of these, but if there's a couple of dozen of them, you know, it can't be just a part-time job for somebody in finance. I feel like somebody's got to be, managing these budgets, because, otherwise, who knows what's flowing through here. Tim?
Well, is there a way then for each of these sections, then all up fiscal year 20 dollars to have like a in progress or completed section? If it's completed and there's still a balance remaining, the master's saying, for an audit, maybe, whatever, or whatever. This way, I know, help me focus a little bit more on what's done and what's still in progress, what's still being done.
Maybe even sort the sheet that way, like, for example, the first item, capital equipment trucks. It says long lead time for equipment to arrive, that looks like an outdated comment, but, I mean, if I were to look at this, I would,
It's still on.
yeah, I would guess that we have 109,000 positive variance of that. Which would flow into, at some point, your cleanup and your authorized tonnage, right?
Yes, or there will be a slot, a later purchase, after schedule to happen later.
Right, but you'd still have to track.
Sure, yes.
Because this is on, this is on one, one authorization for, and that one, I don't think it was all that specific, like 3 trucks. I think it was, we allocated a certain amount of money in the budget, and I think we, at the time, John Marsilio said, listen, if I can't, I might get Y, it depends on availability, so may not be a perfect example, but you know what I mean.
So,
I think this would help with the authorized submission, because these things are dragging on years, and if this was clean, and you could see what the remaining amounts were on these once they were closed, that would be your data that goes into that process, right?
yeah, and we, just, to give you, so, 6th, will be his next round of capital appointment. That will have a request in for the next 3 years.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts, but it'd be good to, and maybe give it some thought, and we could, maybe, upgrade this schedule over time to include, maybe as Jim suggested, status, and understand whether these remaining amounts, even if it's just in the comments, we can understand what this stuff means.
This is a homemade report. We're hoping that with some of the munis upgrades that we look at, that may be a good way to run this, because there's a little bit of duplication that goes on here, what's inputted here.
Yes.
To munis, but yeah, I'm hoping that.
Can you, if you get an approved bid, do you enter that into munis? I mean, can invoices be tracked against that?
If we get an approved.
Yeah. Like, let's just say we, 3,920,000 was authorized.
Yep.
Or maybe that's not a good one, but like a construction project, X amount was authorized, say 4 million. We put it out to bid. Bid comes in at 3.5 million. Does that number go into munis? Like, how do we track?
Do you want to talk about
Yeah.
that process and when those things happen?
So, as you guys know, the contract was before the board of selectmen first, right? So that's the first, once it gets bid, it gets accepted, goes to the board of selectmen. The next step would be the department head would put a purchase order in for the amount of the bid.
Okay,
So they actually go through and they attach all the bid documents, all the approvals, put a purchase order that encumbers
so that
that.
goes into munis.
They enter a rec, which becomes a PO,
Yep.
exactly that bid amount.
Mhm.
Because that in theory is what we should be paying that vendor.
And you can't process invoices above that amount.
No, we process invoices when, they get invoices. They have to receive them in munis, and then we can go ahead, it's like a blanket PO, so it could be for $3 million. They get an invoice for 50,000, right, we go ahead, we get that, and then to Jared's point, if there's change orders, we do change orders to the purchase order.
So that 3 million number might come through once.
Normally does. Like our last thing for the Harding project, I think we're on application 24 for change orders.
But that's tracked in the system.
Yeah, and again, change orders, and you can tell, we kind of number them, like if it's PO number 5-1-2-3, and then they have to attach all the supporting document for that change order.
Does anyone have questions on the non-ARPA? Anything on ARPA to know? I think last time we spoke, there was a concern that, some of these might be at risk, and so we had extra money that we didn't want to.
So some of these, in talking with some of the department heads, I think may be in jeopardy of being completed by the end of 2024. But we're still confident that we'll meet the second deadline, which is the end of 2026, to have everything actually completed, all money spent.
Did they have to be encumbered by the end of 2024?
Yes, they have, yeah, by 2024, and we're still confident that each one of these, that's on here.
So if you were to read this schedule though, we have 13.6 million that's unencumbered and has to be, and we have till the end of 24.
Yep.
And that's, what about half the original amount?
Yeah, a little more than that.
Let's go with recovery assistance. Is that over?
Nope, it's still going.
COVID's been determined to be over. So.
Yeah.
By the federal government, the state government.
The pandemic's officially over.
What is that for?
Yeah, they're still looking, this was the successor program to what started off as the COVID relief program that was kind of during, that was happening during COVID, and this is sort of the fallout that people may be experiencing. That's the way it was set up. So it's just the second phase, the recovery portion of it.
So
And there's the same committee, there was a committee that was set up to process the applications and review the applications. So that committee is looking at the applications that comes.
Is there an end date to this committee?
Not right now.
should there be?
Yeah. There has to be. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would have thought maybe the end of the emergency orders might have been a logical endpoint.
Yeah, I mean, it might be good to look at the kind of the nature of the applications that are coming
Yeah,
in.
see what's in the pipeline. I mean,
It's a good question about that downtown resilience renewable servicing. Is that a typo or am I reading that correct? That the options vary from $2 million to 17?
Yeah, so no, I think that's right. Depending on what they want to do. But
I
this,
just think the $2 million.
but this,
Considering they only have one.
Well, 1.2.
I think this is sort of related to what this money is being used for. To be in there, but this is strictly for surfacing, this money's for surfacing, not for the infrastructure, the more type of place.
So, got it. So the 1.4 that was budgeted is for a component of a bigger project.
That's right. Yeah,
Understood.
yeah.
And then on the bottom of this page, I know that the paving sidewalk repair, the comment is, work halted for winter and will start in the spring. I know that downtown Fairfield had sidewalks redone in the last couple of weeks, so who knows on that work.
Is that, I was gonna ask that, the sidewalk work that's going on downtown, which, is that this project?
Don't think so. That there was another
steep grant.
grant that we got for that,
We
right?
have Steve grant for 130, we have CDBG funding kicking in for another 50.
Is that on a sheet somewhere
I
then?
don't, I think it's a grant, I think it's labeled a grant for the Steve grant.
But wouldn't it still be on here as a, show the offset?
I think those are really old.
Yeah, that's-
I read those, I think both Steve Grant, CDBG were both,
Yeah. I think they're using some funding from capital number current 15. That's why we struggle to post these projects. It's long.
And then this spill pile amount, is there, are we designating this money for communications so that we can make sure we use that?
Yes.
yeah. I think the difference there is that 2.7.
Yeah, we were using up that bonded amount. I don't know if you guys remember, a couple of years ago. It was like 1.6 bonded, so that's almost done. That was probably a couple of years ago. Then we were gonna tip into this 1 million before moving on to the regular.
I updated, there are a couple of the parks ones that I updated with the actual amount, when the amount came in lower, and we know in,
So is that gonna be, did that get added to the NL?
yes, yeah, it's, not really old.
And can I ask about the electric vehicles?
Mhm.
What is the, status of that?
We're still looking.
Just say I was bought an EV and I got it delivered in 3 days, FYI.
We thought we had,
How much did you spend for it? That's got 40 grand, right?
I spent 40 grand.
Wow.
I got a Tesla and I got it in 3 days. So I'm not sure what we're doing, but there's not, they're out there. In fact, less than that with a rebate, so state rebate.
Charging stations are in.
we thought we had a vendor on the hook. Happening. And we can talk more about it, and maybe that's the issue if we buy them in ones or twos that maybe we could accumulate them over time. I think we were trying to purchase them. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
so that we have,
Yeah.
you know, one of the things we talked about was kind of branding the vehicles and so that people know, like, okay, this is a town vehicle. And so when a car comes to their town, they know, all right, that looks like a town vehicle, looks the same as the other ones that I see. And so to have them all float in the same identifiers.
And which departments would they be for?
Whichever ones are mostly out in the field.
Buildings.
Conservation, building, assessor,
Yeah, zoning enforcement officer.
Need electric
zoning,
crown vics.
yeah.
They gotta look beat up too.
Just get replaced, but take off all of that.
Well, and what's the encumbered part of that? I mean, we have a contract to get $123,000 worth of cars that we've ordered PO for, and we just haven't spent the money.
That's actually a good question.
Who owns this one? Is this, who's in charge of this, project?
Tom Bremer works a lot with the department that's on this.
Yeah. Oh,
Charging stations are, there's a for
town use only.
The town would so that's right, yep.
So the BOE HVAC, I guess that'll be this summer.
Is it the summer doing?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, yep.
And just, the Perry screen bulkhead, was that, was a concern about that one in terms of the dollar amount? Is there any further information on that one? I mean, I can't remember where I'm getting this, but I thought we were told that one might be significantly in excess of the,
You might be right. There were a couple, that- oh, well, one of them being Mr. River, which is sort of a much bigger project. And Perry's Green may also have been that they think might go over, but I don't think we have it nailed down. I'll do with the proposal for that. But I'll go check.
yeah, I mean, my concern, obviously, this is a lot of projects, and Jared, I know you've talked about the challenge, it's not always the dollars, but the resources to manage all these. And, I think everybody's very sympathetic to that. I just, it's crazy how much time has gone by.
Yeah.
You know, and it's really not that long. I mean, it's basically another year and a half before these things all have to be encumbered, so. You know, might be, you know, I mean, I just think we have to keep an eye on it. It's,
Yeah, I mean, I met with them, with the department heads, I think a month ago. And like I said, none of them expressed any concerns about an Emirates projects at this point.
any questions, any other questions, Dennis? All right. That is, the substantive items on our agenda. So item 8, to hear, consider, and act on any communications. You have anything, Jared?
No.
So I just want to follow up on a couple of things. I think it was our last meeting, and I think it might have been Mr. Walsh asked for, an update from the tax assessor. This is when we set the mill rate. BAA adjustments or, right?
Yeah.
Can we plan to put that on the agenda for our June meeting?
Yep.
And then another small thing, I know when we approved the WPCA projects last time, we had to approve the WPCA transfer, so if we get, be good to get that done before we break for the summer too. And then we'll have an update from the Board of Education.
So the transfer, I think you're talking about second
It's like
digester, right?
$400,000 or something.
Yeah, I don't know that that's gonna be,
Yeah, it was part of the 11, so we approved the 11 million in bonding, but then 400,000 had. to
oh,
be-
right,
That one.
Right.
Yeah.
yep.
And
And
we normally would do those at the same time, but that came up quickly, so it just.
that one came up quickly because.
It'd just
we
be good to get
wanted
that
to
on.
get it authorized so we could,
Yeah.
get it.
Thanks, just draft up that transfer.
Yep.
Is there any other,
BOE update is in regards to presentation on security.
well, and also the follow-up questions from tonight.
So the police will be there.
Um,
Supposed to go to executive
Turn
session.
our executive session.
We're talking about doing that in June.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I have to follow up, with the chairwoman. I think there was, I'll follow up with her. I think there was a question about what they were permitted to go into executive session on that matter with non-board of education members. So I'll follow up.
What their board was allowed to?
Yeah, what they can go into executive session on that topic. With people outside the board.
Yeah, they should probably look into it and legal.
That's what they were doing.
Really our executive session. So it's what?
That was my, that
That
was my initial reaction. I'm going off of a conversation from a couple weeks ago. My reaction was, it's our board meeting. It's not us joining a meeting of their board. It's having a representative from.
Any consultant, whatever.
Yeah, so I don't know if we're gonna have that in June or not. If not, we can do that in a special meeting at some point, perhaps in the summer. Let me see what their thought process is. And if we're gonna be
If there's a
ready.
problem with that, you ask Attorney Baldwin for a legal opinion on supply to us by June first.
I'll ask them to do that.
Okay.
Um,
Before the June meeting.
before the June meeting. I mean, I'm not sure if it's as much gonna be that as the question of whether they're ready to do that, can get it organized for that meeting, which is in 2 weeks. But I would like to have the follow-up on the financial questions. that we discussed. So we make a note about the, because those issues are part of the analysis of what that we're gonna discuss in terms of surplus and remote. And if we're lucky, we may also have a purchasing policy.
That'd be great,
We'll see. We compiling our.
because otherwise, unless this is a special meeting,
Yeah.
it waits till September.
No, it's not going to be.
Good.
That's it.
Adjourn?
All right, motion to adjourn. Mr. Crowe, Mr. Walsh, good night, everyone. John,
Well,
no Walsh.
I think you will. Tomorrow.